All right, here we go. Can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully.
Yes.
Nice. Okay, so
Yes.
good evening, my brothers and sisters. What a blessing it is to be here. What a blessing it is to, know my roots and to reconnect with my family. And, what a blessing it is to just be here to be able to share my journey of how I reclaimed my identity. And so the way I want to begin this presentation is I want everyone to just look at the screen and look at these two words, Native American. And then I want you to visualize the first image that comes to your mind when you think of a Native American. And I'll just give you a few seconds to think of when you think of a Native American. For some, I wonder, could it be like this image here of Sitting Bull, a strong man, defiant, indigenous, native to the land. You see his face, he's defiant, fierce, native. Or I wonder, could it be an image of this? Some would call a pagan. Their skin is a little less melanated, but obviously they're in bondage. They have ropes on their hands. They seem to be enslaved or slaves, Native Americans. I just wonder which image comes to your mind when you think of a Native American. Do you think of the chief or do you think of the enslaved? Now, I want you to think about these two words, European immigrants. And we're talking about European immigrants to early America, the early European settlers. When you think of the European immigrants, what do you think of? Could it be an image such as this? You see some men who are seemingly religious, looks like they're throwing praise up to their God. You see one man is kneeling down in prayer. You see they're well dressed. They just made a long voyage. They seem to be happy. Is this what you think of when you think of the early Europeans? Is this the image? Or is this the image? Do you think of the poor? As you can see, everyone's even barefoot. They're in a cotton field. Although it seems cotton has become synonymous with the African, especially in America. But look, poor, cotton field, European immigrants. Okay, now, when you think of African American, and I'm not talking about the term African American, which was created in the 1980s. I'm talking about like the early African in America. What do you think of? Do you think of Juan Garrido? The African who came as a Spanish conquistador. He came as a conqueror to America. Some say he's one of the first Africans to step foot in America. One of the first Africans, according to some scholars, but one of the first Africans who came as a conqueror and not as someone in bondage. Do you think of that? Or do you think of an image like this, where you see our African women enslaved and you see their children also in bondage? What do you think of? When you hear this word, slave, this five-letter word, which has wreaked havoc on African people worldwide, when you hear this word, slave, what image do you think of? Just be completely honest. No one knows your thoughts except you. When you hear this word, slave, what do you think of? Do you think of something like this? Do you think of Europeans enslaving other Europeans? You see a European woman with a baby in her arm, chained in shackles, and you see what seems to be the overseer. He's about to flog this other man. Do you think of that when you think of slave? Do you think of European slavery? My point in showing those pictures is to one, get your attention, but for two, also, is just to kind of highlight the impact that what I call European history has had on the African psyche, especially when it comes to, and specifically when it comes to the history of the African in America. Most people, I would be willing to bet, most people, most Africans who are born in America, I'll be willing to bet when you ask them about their early history, knowledge of themselves, I will be willing to bet that they're going to take you to 1619 or the early 17th century. They're going to take you to the Middle Passage, the transatlantic slave trade. They're going to tell you that they can't trace their history before slavery, that they don't know where in Africa their ancestors are from, but all they know is slavery. So the word slave has almost become synonymous with African history, African American history. That is how I was raised. That is what I was brainwashed to believe. So the purpose of this meeting today is to share with you information that I learned to dispel those lies and ultimately share with you how I reclaim my identity. So I want to be clear, my purpose is not to point fingers, to indict anyone. I'm not trying to teach anyone. I just want to come to you with open hands and share with you things that I have learned on my journey to reclaim my identity. And this essentially took 5 steps for me to accomplish this. Step number 1, I realized I was brainwashed. I realized that the slave was actually created. I realized that freedom for us in America, it wasn't free. I realized I was rebranded, and then finally I realized who I am. And I'll conclude with that, realizing who I am. And if I can go back to, let's see if I can go back to this image here for just a second. I wrote some notes down. Actually, I'll go here first. So although when we think of slavery in America, we think of the African, I think it's important to know that the African was not the first to be enslaved in America. He was actually the third. The Native American was the first to be enslaved over here. The Native American, the pagan Native Americans, they were enslaved because they didn't believe in Christ. You know, this is the European logic, right? The second was the actual Europeans. Some historians estimate that 2/3 of the white colonists, the early white colonists, 2/3 worked for a term, you know, in the fields or in the kitchen. 2/3 were essentially enslaved, but see, they're so particular about that word slave, they don't call their ancestors slaves. They would say they were indentured servants. They were servants. They would say working out a term of service, not slaves. They don't want their descendants to know that their ancestors were slaves, you know. But we're gonna get into what is a slave and why the Africans were not slaves. We're gonna get into that later. But I just want to, my point in showing these images is that these people were also enslaved. Yet when you think of them, you don't think of bondage. But when you think of the African who has essentially way more history than these two groups, you limit the African history in this little box of slavery. But let's jump into how I was brainwashed, or my awakening when I realized that I was brainwashed. Check this out. Who are the main culprits of my brainwashing? I can't tell this story enough. The American school system and the curriculum. These are some of the lies that my high school teachers actually told us in class. And let me paint a picture of you for the classroom, since we're just having a discussion. I went to a very small high school. My graduating class was roughly 30 people, roughly. Out of 30, there were 3 Black people. I'm one of 3 in a graduating class of rural white people. Okay. So imagine me sitting in history class, oftentimes the only African person in class, surrounded by white Americans. And my history teacher says this: no slaves existed in my hometown. He got that out. He made that point clear from the beginning. Then he goes to say, black people are genetically more athletic than white people only because black people were slaves for hundreds of years. This was actually on a test. I remember taking a test. This was on a test. Black people are more genetically more athletic than white people only because black people were slaves. And he gave an example. The slaves are chopping wood and picking cotton, and they're running away for their freedom. So they're working out, so of course they're going to be in better shape. He's not taking in consideration the fact that our enslaved ancestors were at times malnutrition, overworked, malnutrition, definitely in a state of distress 24/7. Yet they didn't perish. But he says Africans started the slave trade. So before you cast the stone at anyone else, is what essentially he was saying, look to Africa first, because they're the ones who sold their brothers into slavery. These are things that he's telling us in my 12th grade history class. He's a teacher. He has a degree, right? He's a history major. He has a history degree. And these are the things that he's telling us about history. Okay. Being young-minded at that time, I didn't necessarily care to challenge those lies. But now I realize how detrimental it is for our kids to be miseducated professionally at this level. I have a cousin who's about 6 years younger than me. He had that same teacher. The same teacher told those same lies. But I'm at a point in life now where I told my cousin the real history, but that's besides the point. They're actually indoctrinating kids with historical lies, right? The brainwashing is a real thing. So he said that no slaves existed in my hometown. Okay. A few years ago, I just never let that go. I'm 27 now. It's been almost 10 years since that. I never let it go. I did some research into my hometown, and I noticed when you're trying to find facts about slavery, especially in America, if you try to use the word slave, you're not going to yield any results. Nah, they didn't call them slaves or even enslaved. What you have to look for is Negro and Negress. So using those search words, I found last wills and testaments of people from my hometown. Check out this highlighted portion. This is from the will of Peter Urshery, who, by the way, Peter Urshery, desired to be buried in a decent and Christian-like manner. He's a Christian man, He hopes for eternal salvation through the merits and atonement of the blessed Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, whose religions I have professed. And okay, so Will Urshery, a Christian man, he says, I also give and bequeath to my beloved wife the following Negroes: Levi, a man about 48 years old; Faitha, a woman about 43 years old; and her youngest child, Gracie Dick, about 8 years old; Rutha, a girl about 14 years old; 2 mules or horses, as she may choose from my stock of mules or horses; 4 cows and calves. So he's giving livestock, he's passing livestock on to his wife and passing his Negroes on to his wife. The proof is in the historical documents, the last will and testaments. Obviously, slavery existed in my hometown. My question is, why would they perpetuate that lie that it didn't exist? Is it because they wanted to write my ancestors out of history? Is it because they were deeply ashamed of their ancestors' actions, so they rather cover it with a lie? Is it because they want to keep us ignorant and not know the truth because maybe they fear that we will want revenge or be deeply hurt? Whatever the case, they lied. And as you see, this looks like a family. It looks like a man, he's 48, his wife, she's 43, and they have 2 kids. Okay, 8 years and 14 years old. These are children that these people are owning. The interesting thing about this is when you see Peter Ushery, that last name Ushery, in my hometown, I went to school with Usherys. I used to work for a man whose last name was Ushery, you know, whose last name was Ushery. I'm pretty sure, and this is totally speculative, you know, but according to public knowledge, Peter Ushery owned Negroes. I'm pretty sure that the people I went to school with are descendants of Peter Ushery. Maybe that's why they told the lie, you know. But this will is from 1859. You see people witnessed it. Underwood, Phelps, Moat, Lowe. I went to school with people with all these same surnames. Okay. I went to school with people with these same surnames. This is deeply personal for me. I found another historic document was documented the first mortgage ever recorded in my hometown. And basically this lady gave, to secure her debt, she gave a certain Negro named Mahala, of dark complexion, about 18 years old, of about ordinary height. This is more proof that slavery did exist, but more importantly, I chose this picture. I just typed in a West African woman on Google. I chose this picture rather than the picture of, you know, our enslaved ancestors because I wanted to paint Mahala as a human with her culture. This was, you know, presumably a mother, or she was 18, maybe a mother, but a daughter, you know, I'm sure she was a sister. This was a human. This was in 1858. 1858. For perspective, my grandmother was born in 1933. So this could have easily been my grandmother's grandmother, you know. So I guess my point with this is actually, I'll go to the next slide. I wrote a poem for Mahala. I was so deeply moved by her story when I discovered it. I call it Mahala, once lost and displaced, twice shamed and disgraced, thrice sold and untold, forever ebony and bold. You were a survivor. The world will now know your name. God did not forget you. Your life was not in vain. Your life was not in vain. Your life was not in vain. Although they tried to write her out of the history books by saying that slavery never existed in my hometown, you know, I take it as my personal journey, my personal duty to correct those lies and let her story be told. That doesn't mean I necessarily want revenge, but I want acknowledgement. And so after realizing I was brainwashed, that's one of the things that really I focused on. It's so when I wrote a book called Uprooted, my memoir called Uprooted, I cemented Mahala's story in that book because I wanted to be told, you know, especially since kids are still being brainwashed in that history class, I'm sure of. So step one, I realized I was brainwashed. Step two of reclaiming my identity, I realized that the slave was created. And by slave, I'm specifically talking about our African ancestors who were enslaved in America. I chose this picture and not a picture of enslaved Africans because I really want to change that image of when you think of the word slave, you think of the Africans as if that's our only history. Other people were enslaved. I believe this is from the Barbary slave trade. I believe they look like Muslims, but I don't, you know, I believe it's Barbary, but they're not that dark African people that you normally associate with slavery. So I realized the slave was created. Okay. In realizing that the slave was created, I just wanted to highlight briefly, we've covered this before, some of the losses that Mama Africa took. 20 million enslaved Africans were sent across the ocean. 20 million. That's what some historians estimate. Now, of course, you have other historians who underestimate that number for whatever personal reasons they have to do that. But 20 million were sent across the ocean. 80 million died. 80 million. 80 million died. Many died from exposure, disease, grief, or suicide. Okay, I learned that many died during slave raids. John Weathermack says that when a village was raided, often the very young and the very old and the sick were killed. They didn't take the babies. They didn't take the elders. That goes to show when Brother Monte was speaking about they took the best. When he said they took the best, he's saying they took the strongest, the able. They took the ones who they knew could survive those holding cells, those barracoons. They took the ones they knew who could survive on that poor diet, who could survive on that voyage to the so-called new world. The babies and the elders couldn't make it. They were murdered. 80 million died. Let's take a look at an image from a ship, a so-called slave ship, right? And let's look at how close our African ancestors were to each other on this voyage, chained side by side. A primary source, somebody who actually experienced this, Olado Equiano, he wrote an autobiography about his journey through the Middle Passage. Someone who lived it. He says that the closeness of the place and the heat of the climate added to the number in the ship being so crowded that each had scarcely room to turn themselves, almost suffocated us. So if we go back, you can see when I said exposure, disease, grief, or suicide, you can see how many actually died on the boat ride over here. And you have to think about it. Now, as African people, we're a clean people. You know, we like to be clean. We wash our hands before we eat. We're not associated with filth per se. Think about on this boat, on this ship, and this damp deck, you are chained side by side. To your left, there's somebody. To your left, there's somebody chained to you. To your right, there's somebody chained to you. When you have to urinate, you urinate on yourself. When you have to defecate, you're defecating on yourself. When you vomit, you vomit it on yourself. And you're smelling all these smells. Dead bodies are also chained. You may be chained to a dead body. If you could just take a moment to just visualize the horror that our ancestors had to experience to reach their new destination after being taken from their home. We could spend a whole presentation on the boat ride over here, not to mention the grief that they had to experience after being stolen from their children and their family. Yet these people didn't perish. They didn't perish. Olado Equiano goes on to say, it produced copious perspirations, so the air soon became unfit for respiration from a variety of loathsome smells and brought on a sickness amongst the slaves, of which many died. He's telling you from his personal experience. Many people died because they couldn't even breathe from these horrible smells that are circulating on this ship deck. Interesting enough, as I read his autobiography, he states how many tried to commit suicide. They tried to jump overboard. Some did successfully commit suicide by jumping overboard. But he goes to mention those who tried to jump and got caught, they were beaten so viciously in front of everybody to deter any other further attempts to do that. So even if they wanted to take a way out, they couldn't. They had to just suffer. Okay. But I'm going to show you how this ties into how the slave was created. First, I want to tell you about a story called Ebo Landing. Ebo Landing. This is in 1803. Okay. The Europeans thought the Africans were slaves. They branded us as slaves. They thought we're slaves. Okay. So around 1803, 75 Igbo were captured in Africa, Nigeria, what is now Nigeria, brought to Savannah, Georgia. They were purchased in Savannah, Georgia, and they were transported to St. Simon's Island, Georgia. You know, the purchaser thought he purchased some slaves. Okay. In the midst of the transportation, the Igbo overtook that ship, caused it to drown the European captors, and consequently, they ended up drowning themselves, but they chose death over a life of slavery. They had their own free will. My point is that a slave doesn't have free will. A slave has a master, and the master controls the slave's every movement. Obviously, these Igbo were not slaves. If they were, they would have been submissive. But through brainwashing, the slave is created. Through brainwashing, they actually can be controlled. And so let's look at the losses of the African diaspora, specifically America, but I believe that this can also be said for the diaspora, everywhere, in Brazil, in the Caribbean, everywhere. So one of the main things that we lost was the rights to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as elegantly quoted in the Declaration of Independence in 1776. They said every man has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson would agree with this message, that every man should have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thomas Jefferson owned over 600 African men, women, and children. He owned over 600 men, women, and children. Yet he's talking about every man has the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The important thing that I learned is that in order to soothe their consciousness, in order to provide rationale for the treatment of the African people, they had to be demoted from human to slave. The slave is not necessarily regarded as a human. The slave is more regarded as an animal, as cattle, as you could see from that last will and testament. After he named off these Negroes he's leaving to his wife, he says, and also my mules and horses, my cows, and so forth. The slave had to be created for the plantation owners to soothe their consciousness, essentially. We lost the right to parenthood. Mothers, if you read, if you go to the Library of Congress, in the 1930s, during the Great Depression in America, the government created a project, the Federal Writers Project, I believe it's called the Federal Writers Project. But they basically sent white authors, white writers and journalists throughout the American South to interview people who were formerly enslaved. Now, these people in the 30s, they're probably about 80 to 90 years old. They're elderly. Some can barely remember the days of slavery, but some had great memories. And so, in giving their stories to these authors, you can hear how many said that, the women they will be pregnant, they will be working in the fields, 9 months pregnant, right? As soon as they have the baby, a few days later, they're back to work. They can't take care of their children. The children sometimes are even sold from them. And their babies are ripped out of their bosom and replaced with the babies from the plantation owners. So they're breastfeeding the white babies, can't even take care of their own babies. They lost the right to parenthood. A father lost the right to protect his precious children, to protect his wife. Can you imagine the damage that did to the African psyche? They lost the right to religious freedom. They can't pray to the God they want to pray with. They have to pray to the God of their oppressor, at least in public anyway. They lost the right to speak their mother tongue. This is why, my brothers and sisters, I'm communicating to you now in English. That's my first language, English. My last name, I think my last name is traced to England as well. To this day, I don't speak the mother tongue. I speak the English language. We lost the sacred family lineage, critical ancestral knowledge, and we lost an identity because we went from being humans or from whatever respective tribes we were from, such as the Bamileke, such as the Tikar, such as the Igbo, the House of the Fulani. All that has changed once you get to America. You know, you get a new name, a Christian name, a European name. You get a new religion. And also, you get a new status. You're no longer human. Now you're a beast. You're a slave. You're a slave. Going back to those Library of Congress narratives, one stuck out to me how when it was time to eat, when it was like essentially lunchtime on the plantation, they would basically put a big pot in the middle of the field, dump slop in it as if what you would feed a pig, just leftover discarded food, and all the children, the little beautiful children would run because they're so hungry and reach in their hands in the pot and eat as if animals ate. They treated us as animals. That's the whole slave being created. You had to be demoted from a human to a slave to rationalize the behavior. They wanted us to believe that the slavery was imprinted on our DNA, meaning that when you have children, your children is also a slave. They're also slaves, and their children, and their children, and so forth. Going back to the Europeans enslaved during indentured servitude, the belief was always that a white man is born free. Although your father is enslaved for years, if he has a child, they're born free. But with us, it's like they imprinted it on our DNA that we are slaves. Now, this label, slavery, this only existed in European psyche. Okay, obviously, slave is not written on your DNA. I mean, African is written on my DNA. That's how they trace me back to the Bamileke of Cameroon. Slave is not written on your DNA, but through brainwashing and through violence, you can realize how we accepted this identity as descendants of slavery. There's even a movement in America now. It's called, I think, ADOS or something, ADOS, American Descendant of Slavery. Wow, that's another conversation. We lost the knowledge of self. Okay. Many long conversations I had with Brother Monte, very knowledgeable. And I told him I'm always listening and taking notes. We lost the knowledge of self through the demonization of African spiritual beliefs. They made us believe, they made the slave believe, and by slave, I'm saying the animal, they made the slave believe that whatever his ancestors practiced is bad, it's horrible, it's demonic, it's witchcraft, it's outlawed, it's not right. I'll give you an example of why they feared it so much. If you look at voodoo in the Haitian Revolution, you know, Dutty Boukman led a voodoo ceremony essentially, you know, and in Haiti, that's one of the things that connected those enslaved Africans there. They all had some type of foundational knowledge of, if it wasn't necessarily voodoo, it was like the same spiritual beliefs in a way, somewhat connected, if not necessarily the same, but connected. So he led a voodoo ceremony, you know, sacrificed a black pig, I believe. You know, they took an oath of allegiance. A week later, they rebelled. I believe 1,800 plantations in Haiti were burned. The power of voodoo. The power of voodoo led them to overlook that massive fear that they had and to rebel, you know, leading to their freedom. Similarly, I believe it's called Obeah. I may be pronouncing it wrong, but it's essentially an African spiritual belief that was prevalent in the Caribbean, the Bahamas. Okay. The Bahamas actually passed a law in 1898 and outlawed that for fear that the Africans were using it to do evil against them, to do evil against, you know, the Europeans. So you see that you're stripped of your African spiritual beliefs, but what does that replace with? That leads me to the usage of the slave Bible. Now, I'm not calling Christianity a slave religion at all. The slave Bible is an actual Bible. It's what it's titled, the slave Bible. It's housed in the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. This is what it's called. The slave Bible is missing 90% of the Old Testament. It's missing 50% of the New Testament. The slave Bible only has 232 verses chapters out of 1,189 chapters in the Bible. The slave Bible doesn't have verses like this. When you hear Paul's letters to the Galatians, Paul says, there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. If you look at the book of Exodus, and it says, he that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death, condemned in slavery. The slave Bible doesn't contain these passages at all. The slave Bible contains passages such as, servants, be obedient to them that are your masters. From Paul's letters to Ephesians. It's like cut. None of the Psalms are in the slave Bible. The book of Revelation is not in the slave Bible. The book of Exodus, the Israelites being enslaved in Egypt and Moses leads them to their freedom, that's not in the slave Bible. So the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. actually has a copy of this slave Bible. And this was used by some plantation owners throughout, the Americas to teach their slaves about Christianity. This is a real thing. This is real indoctrination. Okay. The slave was created through the working of the body and the emptying of the mind. Work your body, empty your mind. The dismantling of the family. I love my son so much, and I have a child on the way. I love my child so much. It's scary how much I love them. I can't imagine the pain and the agony that our African ancestors, the fathers and the mothers alike, but specifically the fathers, felt. Their children are being sold away from them. And you can't do anything, because if you rebel, you're going to be made an example out of for others, for everyone to see. Sold away from your family. Children are sold away from their mothers, as was Booker T. Washington, as was Frederick Douglass. He didn't have many memories of his mother, Anti-literacy laws and slave codes. I talked about the use of the slave Bible, and then we know about slave patrols, meaning that the slave had to be illiterate. They don't want the slave to read or write because he's going to learn. The slave's only education is essentially Bible study or church on Sunday. That's his only education. So slaves couldn't read or write, but, they didn't want them to read or write, only because many were forging letters. So to leave the plantation, you had to have a written pass. Your master had to give you a pass in order to leave the plantation. If you get caught off that plantation without a pass, you're subject to a beating. You may not necessarily get killed because you're the property of someone else. He paid good money for you. They're going to be angry. Just like their horse escaped the plantation and they found the horse, they probably won't kill the horse. They may have to beat it to stop it from bucking, but they're going to want to return it back to the owner. But you will get beaten. You will get beat. Slaves who could read or write, they were forging notes, some using that method to escape to freedom. So they can't have that. They couldn't have that. So anti-literacy laws, I actually have a slide on it. Okay. These are examples of actual slave codes about the learning prohibition. Any person who shall attempt to teach any free person of color or slave to spell, read, or write shall upon conviction by indictment be fined a sum of not less than $250. If you teach a free Black person or a slave to read or write, you're subject to a fine. Look at what Virginia says. All servants imported and brought into the country who are not Christians in their native country, they shall be accounted and be slaves. So if you weren't a Christian in your home country, when you come here, you're a slave. This is Virginia Slave Code 1705. Okay, so the slave was created through lack of education, through ignorance, through the dismantling of the family. I'm going back to this slide. Me and my wife visited Boone Hall Plantation in Charleston, South Carolina. This is images that I took. These are plantation homes. They call them slave homes. I wanted to go to the sacred ground. I wanted to walk inside. I wanted to really see if I could just put myself in their shoes to see how they lived, to show them that they weren't forgotten, even though we try to write them out of history so much. But yeah, I just wanted to share a picture from the conditions of the houses that some lived. Okay. So I told you that I realized I was brainwashed. I realized the slave was created. Number 3 on how I reclaim my identity is I realized our struggle after freedom. Supposedly we were granted freedom, 1863, the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Although in Texas, they didn't get that message until 1865, which is why we celebrate Juneteenth when the enslaved were finally free in Texas. But you can see a news article here. It's from May 15, 1916. 15,000 saw Negro burned. 15,000. After we got our freedom, we entered into one of the darkest periods of American history. Violence, I can't even really explain it, but I can show you through pictures. This is what a scene would have looked like. Thousands to witness a murder, a lynching, thousands. When you hear this article, 15,000 saw Negro burned, they're referring to Jesse Washington. Look at to the right of his body, you see this young man. They bring their children to witness these things. This is a spectacle. Look behind. People are in the trees. People are in the trees to watch. You see that chain on Jesse Washington's body? Jesse Washington was convicted of murdering a white lady. He was convicted of it. And after he was convicted, when he was being escorted to go to prison, Jesse Washington was taken by this mob of 15,000 people. A chain placed on his body, chained to a truck and drugged throughout the streets. He was stabbed, beaten, shot hundreds of times, hanged, and then set on fire. And 15,000 people watched this and brought their children to watch it. Professional photographer captured the scene. People took body parts of Jesse Washington as souvenirs. He was plastered on postcards. This is our struggle after freedom. After freedom. Okay, Montgomery, Alabama. I was there last year for 2 months for work, temporary duty. I was in Montgomery. They have a museum called the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. National Memorial for Peace and Justice. It's created by the Equal Justice Initiative, who was founded by Brian Stevenson. Brian Stevenson, it's a movie called Just Mercy. If you've seen it, that's what is based on his work. But anyway, you see the statue, right? But that's not what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on the top of that hill, and you see those things that are hanging. It's like pillars hanging. Okay. Each pillar is dedicated to a particular county in a particular state. So one pillar may say Shelby County, Tennessee. And it lists off every single person who was lynched from the late 1800s to the mid 1900s, who was lynched in Shelby County, Tennessee. It'll list every single person, their name and the date. Now, there are thousands of these pillars on site. That shows you how many people were lynched. Not surprisingly, I found one of my county as well, Glasscock County. More hidden history that I had to discover years later after being thoroughly brainwashed. But these people are lynched for the simplest of offenses, you know, such as I'm walking on the sidewalk and a white man is approaching me and I don't step off in the grass or the mud to let him pass. That's deeply offensive. I'm bound to be lynched for that. If I didn't call him yes, sir, or call a child yes, sir, or no, ma'am, a mob is more than likely coming. This is evident through the story of Emmett Till. All he did was whistle, supposedly. He whistled. He just whistled. And he was only 14. So we suffered greatly after our freedom, I would say. This is just another statue from that same museum. If you're ever in Montgomery, Alabama, I highly suggest that you check it out. If I can backtrack a minute, I know what I forgot to say. I didn't stay at this plantation for long because I was thoroughly disgusted. I was disgusted by the amount of people who were taking selfies and taking pictures and talking about how beautiful the grounds were, how beautiful the big house were, how beautiful the gardens were, how beautiful it was. People have weddings at these plantations. A plantation style home is very cherished in the South. They call it antebellum, like it's beautiful history. I was disgusted and angered. I couldn't be there, so I left. They saw it as a place of beauty and luxury, and I saw it as a place of torture, a graveyard, a place of survival. But it's hard to get people to see things your way, especially when their people weren't necessarily affected by it. Okay, I chose this picture. I didn't want to forget about these two brothers either. I didn't want their story to be lost in history. Somebody has to tell their stories. If not, their lives were for nothing. Paul Reed, Will Cato. This is in Statesboro, Georgia. For those who don't know, I was born in Georgia. I'm a Georgian, okay? Georgia had the most counties where a lynching occurred than any other state. The most counties where a lynching occurred. This is in Statesboro. Paul Reed and Will Cato were accused. A white family's house burned down, essentially. And, you know, I think a family of 4 or 5, they were burned. Paul was a sharecropper on the farm where the people burned. This is in 1904. So they found Paul's shoes and automatically assumed that he murdered the people and, you know, set the house on fire to hide it. So, of course, they were brought in for questioning. News articles say they confessed to it, but we know from history that people are coerced. You can get people to say anything when you have instruments of torture on them. But look at Paul's face. Paul is defiant and fierce. He accepts his fate for what it is. It does suck. Check this out. So they went to court. They were found guilty. And before they could also be escorted to their new prison, mob rule. Thousands of white Americans stormed the courtroom, even though the militia was there. They had a militia protecting them. Stormed the courtroom, grabbed them, chained them to a tree stump, and set them on fire. Oh, and hired a professional photographer to capture the scene, to place on a postcard. This is from Greenwood, Oklahoma, Tulsa. It's what they call Black Wall Street. A vibrant business, a vibrant place. You know, Black Wall Street is totally black on. This is in 1921, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who's listening. I believe 1921. Black Wall Street. I got it right. You're familiar with the story. Everyone's familiar with the story. Black Wall Street exemplified Black entrepreneurship. exemplified, you know, not depending on anyone else, but it showed that through numbers we can support ourselves. Black Wall Street had numerous grocery stores, movie theaters, hospitals, laundromats, barbershops, whatever you can think of, all black owned. These are professional black people who are only about 60 years out of slavery, who literally started with nothing. Their ancestors were enslaved. They started with nothing. They built from the ground up. Black Wall Street, a beautiful place. And people wonder why, well, why can't black people pull themselves up now? As if we never did before. Well, let's see what happened to Black Wall Street. It was burned down. It was burned down over confusion, over a guy in an elevator, a black man in an elevator, supposedly bumped into a white lady in the elevator. The white lady screamed. The white men had to protect the white lady from, this black beast, this horrible black beast. He's going to rape her or whatever. He harmed her. They want justice. He's arrested. He's waiting in jail. He's waiting. The mob, as they always do, show up at the courthouse. They want vengeance to do what they always do. Except this man had family who came to the scene to protect him. And in the midst of protecting him, shots were fired. A white man was hit. The black family retreated back to regroup and recover because they knew what the consequences of that were. And the white people came into the black neighborhood and burned everything. Now, a few years ago, my mother's house actually burned down. No one was hurt. No one was hurt, but they lost everything. They lost everything. Shoes, purses, clothes, everything. And I remember just looking at the flames and then looking at the remains of the burning house that we knew. That was all we knew. It was really traumatic. Now I'm thinking about this on a wide scale, thousands and thousands of people losing everything, businesses, houses. People are shot in the street. They're estimating 300 to 3,000. They always try to paint it lower. But 300 to 3,000 murdered. It's Black Wall Street. We're talking about our struggle after freedom. How can I describe it? I realized our struggle after freedom by realizing that freedom wasn't free per se. Now, my grandmother and her mother, my great grandmother, they somewhat lived through these things, so they were still somewhat damaged mentally by that fear. That fear can almost hypnotize you in a way. And that's passed on to your children and passed on to and so forth. So you can see how it kind of seeps into, it could seep into my psyche. It could creep into my psyche in a way. But to wrap up, step number 4, I realized we were rebranded. So I told you we went from whatever tribe we identified with, Bamileke, Tikar, Hausa, to captive. And then from captive to slave, we're not even human anymore. They call us slaves, but at some point after freedom, we regained our identities. We rebranded ourselves, whether that was through calling ourselves Negro or Black, or I'll stop at Black. Dr. John Henry Clark tells us, he says, Black tells you how you look, but it doesn't tell you who you are. Now, Jesus said, according to your faith, be it done to you. I threw in a quote from Jesus because when you look at the definition of Black, these are some of the things that pop up. African American, cheerless and depressing, wicked, evil, soiled, dirty, having little or no light. If you calling yourselves Black, I personally believe in the power of words. I believe that you can speak certain things into existence. And if you casting that spell onto yourself, Jesus said, according to your faith, be it done to you. So if you're a Christian, you can leave that up to your interpretation, but it's basically saying you're speaking it into existence. And then if you look at the definition of white, it can be of the color of milk or fresh snow. So by calling myself black, speaking for myself, not speaking for anyone else, speaking for myself, calling myself black, you know, I could be subconsciously, without even knowing it, lowering my vibrations by associating with depression, wicked, evil. You know, this is their definition. Black is their word. Black is not an African word. It's in the European dictionary. It's a European word. Okay. And then by calling someone white, and first of all, you know, I would say this too. If anything, we're very dark brown, not necessarily black. And anything, they're not white. They're a different color. But if we're calling ourselves black and calling them white without knowing the power of these words, I just feel like it could be something there that we could be propelling them and lowering us. And who called us black first anyway? Who gave us that title? Those are questions that I personally had to ask. What were we calling ourselves before black, before we accepted this title? Okay. The title African American, you know, through research, I learned this title hasn't been forever. This is a relatively new title created in the late 1980s. In the late 1980s. So we're rebranded from our tribe to less than human, to slave, Negro, black. Now some of us call ourselves African American. We're constantly being rebranded, constantly looking for that identity. What should we call ourselves? You know, African American is okay with me. You know, I am an American citizen. I do have African DNA. I am African. So, but it really doesn't mean much to me. I can see why many of us why we want to hold on to that American identity, although our ancestors are African. Because look, we have put in a lot of work in this country. You know, we laid the infrastructure for the country. Africans have fought in every American war. Every war Africans have fought in. Look at Charles Young. I'll show you what I mean by the slave was created. Charles Young was born in 1864, so he spent 1 year in slavery. His parents were both enslaved, right? Both enslaved. His father escaped slavery and enlisted in the Civil War. And through his service, he earned his freedom and earned his family's freedom. So he retrieved his family. They moved to Ohio, I believe Ripley, Ohio. Charles Young goes to an all-white school. Now, this is someone whose parents were enslaved and he was enslaved for a year. All-white school, graduated top of the class. Top of the class. Let's see, I wrote notes somewhere. Charles Young was the first black to achieve the rank of colonel in the Army. The first black to achieve the rank of colonel in the Army. He was the third black graduate of the United States Military Academy. He spent 4 years at the United States Military Academy, and the white people did not talk to him for 4 years. He was outcasted and separated for 4 years. Didn't talk to anybody, but he persevered. He persevered. So we have fought for this country. We have built this country. You know, it has to be something there. So I understand why we're adamant about the African American. Okay, now this is a picture. They call these contrabands. These are contrabands, and we're talking about the Civil War. So essentially, when the United States Army was coming through the American South and fighting the rebels, the Confederate armies, they were burning plantations, burning everything. The Africans who were enslaved when the Union Army came, they saw them as saviors. Like, you're saving us from bondage. We'll do anything to join you. We'll fight for you. We'll whatever you want to do, but we can't be on this plantation anymore. We'll follow you. So they followed the armies. They served as scouts. They built bridges. They gathered food and wood. They did whatever they could to help out. Okay. Takes me to the story of Ebenezer Creek. 14,000 Union Army, 14,000 soldiers in the Union Army, right? They have 600 country bands, people like these following them, enslaved people following them, hoping because they're fighting the war for freedom, right? The Civil War. 600 following them. It's December in Georgia, so it's cold. They come to a creek called Ebenezer Creek. Okay, they have to build a bridge to cross that creek. So the Africans don't know the whole time. The Union Army, the generals, they're saying, look, the country bands, they're depleting our resources. We can't feed these people. If we can't move with these people, they're becoming a detriment to our military strategies. We have to do something with these people. And the people, they're saying, look, we've been enslaved. You don't know what we have went through. You know, we just want freedom. We'll help you out. So they get to Ebenezer Creek. The Confederate Army is following the Union Army. They're shooting at them. They're firing shells at them. This is war, so it's horrible. Okay, so they have to help and build the bridge. The bridge is constructed. Now, Brigadier General Jefferson C. Davis, he tells the country band, you know, thank you for all your help, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to cross the bridge first. And after we cross, you know, we're going to make sure that nothing is stopping. The Confederates are in front of us. And then once we clear it, you can cross over. They cross the bridge, and as soon as they cross it, they pull the bridge. They leave the Africans on the other side. The Africans terrified because the Confederates on their rear, guess what they do? They jump into this icy cold river, men, women, and children, and they drown. Yeah, Ebenezer Creek. But they say it was military necessity. They had to do what they had to do. But this just shows you that our people have always, we weren't necessarily asking them to save us. We were saying, we'll follow you and help you out, you know, in exchange for our freedom. But look what they were faced with. Okay, step 5. This is it. After realizing that I was brainwashed, after realizing that the slave was created, after realizing our struggle after freedom, okay, I realized who I am. Who am I? What is my identity? Well, through African ancestry, I traced my lineage back to the Bamileke of Cameroon. But even before then, I'm an African man. That's who I am. That's why my DNA was able to be traced back to my people in Cameroon, because that's in my DNA. They could never trace slave back to my DNA because it doesn't exist. It only exists in the law and legislation. And who created that? Who created those legislation? But it doesn't exist in who I am. So by realizing who I am, I end with a quote that says that I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. And Africa is also born in my son. And it's going to be born in his son and through whatever. Slaves could not be born through that because it was created. It was created. So with that being said, that's my last slide. Hope I didn't put anyone to sleep, but I really appreciate your time and your attention. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to know, did you, when you realized who you were and you went back and you found your actual tribal family, did you become a member of the tribe? Did you change your name? I mean, did anything happen after that?
So what happened immediately is I posted a video on YouTube announcing the results, and Brother Munkam reached out. He saw that video. He reached out to me and invited me into this group, the Reconnection group. So I've been talking to different brothers and different sisters, reconnecting, learning more about the culture. And ultimately, what I want to do, my ultimate goal is to travel back to Cameroon to, you know, go to a village, meet the full, whomever I have to meet, go through a naming ceremony, and, you know, do as many people in this group have already done. So I haven't did it yet, but that is what I'm working towards doing. So yeah, I haven't done it yet, but that's my goal.
Do they offer dual citizenship?
And Brother Munkam, you may can jump in on this. I don't think they do as of yet.
At the moment in Cameroon, they don't actually offer dual citizenship. I mean, me myself, I was born in Cameroon, and when I left Cameroon, I had a Cameroon passport. And then when I came in the UK, I became a British citizen, which means that I kind of like lost my Cameroon citizenship because they don't do dual citizenships. When I do travel to Cameroon now, I have to get a visa to travel there, but that's my home. I was born over there. So they don't at the moment do that, but we're hoping that it's going to change sometime soon.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you.
No, thank you for the question.
Thank you for the last good question.
Brother Justin,
in Cameroon right now, the dual citizenship is not actually possible, but that's going to change soon. That was implemented because some of the political issues going on, because some of the Cameroonian living abroad, were trying to do something against the government, and the government felt like, all right, you know what, we're gonna control your entrance and exit to the country. So since 1972, I believe, they put that restrictions, but the diaspora, the Cameroonian diaspora, we have been pressing the government to, lift that ban and open and give us the dual citizenship, because by putting that, actually, the government is losing a lot of money. So they understand that, but slowly the conversation has been going. So very soon, it's gonna be possible. Yeah.
Brother Justin, I just want to say I really appreciated all the work and effort and history and research you've done. I was very impressed, and I was just curious, have you made this presentation before? It's so professionally done. Have you presented in other places?
Thank you for that, sir. And I have not presented for in other places, but actually I wrote a book last year. I self-published the book through Amazon KDP, and the book highlights essentially everything that I just spoke about. So in creating the presentation, I really just drawn from my book, and it's published. Yeah, so
What's the book title again?
It's called Uprooted.
Uprooted.
Okay,
By Justin Mills. And if you go to Amazon, you should be able to pull it up.
Well, I appreciate it. I was just curious also, because I'm from Georgia. What part is the county you're from? Where are you from?
Yes, sir. It's Glasscock County, and Glasscock County is about 45 minutes from Baldwin County and about an hour from Richmond County.
Okay, and what's the city or town?
The city is called Gibson.
Gibson. Okay. And where are you living now?
Now I'm living in Sumter, South Carolina.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good.
So I'm still in the South.
Yeah. we all are. Yeah. Let me just add one other thing for the sake, and because you brought up the Slave Bible, and it's interesting. I'd been to the Museum of the Bible in DC. Wish I had taken a picture, but I don't think they had the Slave Bible at that time. But I think if I remember correctly, Slave Bible was 1808, and it was done. As you said, they knocked out 90% and 65%. That particular Bible that the Museum of the Bible has actually comes from Fisk University. There's supposedly three original slave Bibles in the world. And one of them is Fisk University. I think the other two are over in England. Fisk got it because of the Fisk Jubilee singers who went over in the early 1900s, and I think the 1800s, to sing to get funds from the Europeans, and for some reason, God ordained reason, they got a copy of that Bible, so it's on loan right now for the museum. But it's in the village, if you will. We've got it. It's ours.
I didn't ever
Absolutely.
know that there was a slave Bible. It's called Slave Bible?
Yes.
It's called the Slave Bible, and it's missing 90% of the
Yes.
Old Testament, and missing 50% of the
Of
New
the-
Testament. So that book, the story of Exodus, the book, the Israelites, that's omitted from the Slave Bible. And many of Jesus's teachings are omitted, but they leave things in there such as, slaves be obedient to them that are your masters, and so forth.
Right. And think about why they did that. Because if they had the whole Bible, they'd understand that they weren't Christian. They
Right.
formed their own Christianity and said, that's it. But our people knew, no, we know you're lying, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But they did. When you think about the mindset, as you said, Brother Milton, just think about the mindset and the energy placed into doing that for the sake of maintaining the lie that we were slaves.
Right. And you see what happens when some enslaved got a hold of the actual Bible and how they used it, such as the Reverend Nat Turner. The Reverend Nat Turner, he was a Christian reverend, and he used that book to say that, look, I know that we're not supposed to be enslaved, and the Bible tells me that we're not supposed to be enslaved, and the Bible tells me what the punishment of you doing me wrong is. So he figured that he would carry out that justice in his own hands. In
God's grace, yes.
In God's grace. In God's
Yes.
grace.
I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier about when you were talking about the history of slavery in the Americas, when you touching upon when slavery ended and you had Europeans being called indentured servants. There was a point in history where Africans were being called indentured servants as well. I wasn't born in I was born in the United States of America, but my parents weren't born in the United States of America. Both of my parents are from Jamaica, West Indies. And when slavery, when the legal institution of slavery was ended in Jamaica, they introduced indentured servitude. You had Scottish people who were indentured servants, Irish people who were indentured servants, and you even had African people who were indentured servants. After slavery was ended in Jamaica, I'm speaking about that specifically because that's what I know. Indentured servants were taken from Congo, or brought in from Congo, and also Nigeria. Now, I honestly believe that this title of indentured servant was a way of keeping Africans enslaved legally after the institution of slavery was legally ended. You had Ijaws, Igbos, and different ethnic groups from Nigeria that were classified as indentured servants, as well as different people from the Congo, which I have ancestry from all of those groups right there. That's something that we have to look into as well. The switch from being classified as enslaved and as an indentured servant. Another thing that you brought up about voodoo and obia, they're all the same thing. Obia, voodoo, what they practice in Tikar land or the Tikar plain or the Bamileke land, it's the same thing. It's ancestral veneration and veneration of the deities that were associated, with our particular ethnic groups. They're just different labels: Vodun, Yoruba, or whatever. It's the same thing as ancestral veneration all of those from Nigeria to Congo to Ghana to Cameroon, we all dealt with the veneration of our ancestors, whether we use the skulls or most people in Ghana, like the airways and so on and so forth, we buried our ancestors within the home, you know, and we paid homage to our ancestors. We offered offerings from pouring libations to food offerings and so on and so forth. It just, you know, after learning about these aspects of our culture, it kind of bothers me how people continue to separate them as if they are different. Vodun, Ifa, Afa, or whatever ancestral veneration or our deity veneration that we've used. It just bothers me that we are all seeing them as different when they're really all the same thing, being called by different names. I just want to thank you, brother. You had a great presentation. It was definitely a treat. You mentioned Equiano. There's so much you covered during your presentation. I suggest that everybody just continue on with their research, continue on looking into the slave, or I should say enslaved narratives. Read as many of those as possible. Look into other histories, such as the history of Muslims in America. I'm not a Muslim, you know, but there were a lot of enslaved Muslims from the Upper Guinea coast, you know, all over, you know, that have been omitted in the history of the transatlantic slave trade, or they're downplayed. There's just so much that was omitted. I just encourage everybody to keep on researching and reading everything, you know. Those of us in the diaspora from the Americas, which includes the United States, Brazil, South America, and the islands in the Caribbean, we have so much history, you know, that have to be explored. You cannot, it's not a linear history, you know. It's a complicated history. So I encourage you not to stop at one perspective. Ask that you continue to keep an open mind and explore all the different information that they have out there. You know, my mind has expanded and have been blown by the information that I've been studying since maybe like 1989, 1990. And I'm still learning. You know, I've been studying for over 30 years, and I'm still learning. So the process of learning never ends. And I just want to encourage you all not to stop at just learning about where you're at this point. You mentioned about the Africans that were brought to the Americas, first brought to Americas, maybe in the 1600s or the early 1700s. From what I've read, one of the first documented Africans brought to America was from Cameroon. You know, I don't know whether he was Bamileke, Tikar, Hausa, or whatever. But one of the first documented Africans brought to the Americas or to the United States was from Cameroon. You've covered so much, so it's hard for me to pinpoint and to speak on a specific thing that you have mentioned. But I just want to leave it open to you all to share from what you have gathered and from this particular lecture by the brother Justin. Thank you, Brother Justin.
Let
Thank
me
you,
let
thank
me
you.
add just one other thing too. Is on that, and I don't know if you can see this, but this book is called "In the Matter of Color." It's written by Leon Hickenbottom, who's a lawyer, one of the first federal judges. This only talks about race and the legal system in colonial days. And I hold this up to show you the breadth of what he does. So as you had talked about, Brother Mills, about us being indentured servants and then becoming slaves, it talks about the law, the Negro Act of, I think, 1682. When we came over in 1619, yeah, you were absolutely right. We were third because it was the indigenous Americans, Indians, and also the whites that were there from Britain. And then all of a sudden they had these new Black Africans, didn't know what to do with it. So when they first started, everybody worked the fields, everybody did the same thing. But then the British started saying, well, what do we do? And all of a sudden you started seeing the trination of where we went from up here all the way down. So in 1682, all of a sudden now we become the lowest. And then later on we become the slave, and later on become the chattel by 1740. So I recommend this in your research to just think of it, because it leads through here, and it's what happens in Virginia, what happens in South Carolina, what happens in Massachusetts. This is the document that to me is interesting, because I'm having a debate right now on some brothers who are in law school asking, have you ever heard of this? Because this pinpoints exactly how the legal system has dealt with race in America since 1619. So as all the brothers say, all of our research is coming together, and this is a great thing, and you just codified it for us in a lot of different ways. And I really compliment you because you're such a young brother, but you're very interested in who you are and where you've come from, as we all are. And so this is great. And again, Makan, this reconnection is just powerful, just powerful. So thank you.
Can you say who the book is by again?
Oh, Leon Hickenbottom.
Spell the last name?
Hickenbottom, Higginbotham Jr. A. Leon Hickenbottom. He was, I think, one of the first federal judges, Black judges in the country. When Martin Luther King got shot, Lyndon Johnson called Hickenbottom to say, what were we going to do when all the riots started? He was at that time, interesting enough, went to the University of Pittsburgh, and then he went, I think, to Yale, and then he went to Howard to get his PhD. But he himself is in the history book. So it's been very interesting just to read the mindset of, and I just put on one other thing. The interesting thing to me was we came over supposedly in 1619, and then by 1682, they were talking about what do we do? And they started making laws. I mean, just law and order thing. And I make a point when I give some talks about 1740, 30 years before America was America, all of a sudden we were chattel. And everything started from chattel. And you went down this thing about you can't do this, it broke our parenthood, broke our. But the thing was interesting to me was in that we were not even allowed to grow our own food. So as Brother Mills was talking about these children in the trough eating, okay, that's absolutely the way they looked at it. We couldn't, and the pass that he talked about, where you had to have a pass to go across the street, so to speak. And then you had to get another pass to come back over. Because they want to make sure you weren't lollygagging somewhere. This fear. So you really brought it to life, Brother Mills. So thank you again.
Thank you, brother Nils. Thank you, Justin. Honestly, I've learned a lot from your presentation. You know, I think it's good for us, you know, brothers born in the continent to know things like that. And I really do hope that when you do travel in Cameroon, I could be traveling with you, so I can take you to some school over there, so you can actually present that to the kid over there in Cameroon. You know, it's something we need to know. So
Can I ask one other question? How do you go about, and this is for Brother Prince, I've been doing research and looking into the slavery and the slave narratives and so forth. Louisiana don't seem to have too much of anything, and I'm having a difficult time trying to research and get information out of the Louisiana state, where some of my ancestors were, Louisiana, South Carolina, Arkansas area. And it seems like Louisiana just don't have anything. I was pretty shocked to get my dad's birth certificate. They whited out where he was from, his age, his nationality. It was crazy. So if you have any suggestions.
I will post in the chat group, the WhatsApp chat group, the slave narrative, the books of the slave narratives that I've read. But I know there's plenty of history in Louisiana, you know, and I am almost certain that there's some history documented and some narratives from Louisiana. The slave cabins and the homes that they used to live in, I have video footage of a lot of those slave cabins that are still standing today in Louisiana. And it blows my mind. I believe I've seen more in Louisiana than I've seen any place else.
Do you know about the Panola plantation?
I don't know the names of the plantations per se, but I've seen video footage of plantations in Louisiana and slave homes, you know, cabins in Louisiana. And a lot of them exist this day. I've been to quite a few in Georgia. You know, as I've said, my parents are from Jamaica, you know, but I've been to quite a few in Georgia. And I believe there are more in Louisiana than there are, you know, that exist today for you to be able to view. There are more, in my opinion, in Louisiana today than they are in Georgia. I've been to a few in Stone Mountain. You know, Stone Mountain has some slave cabins that still exist that were taken from places like Covington, Georgia. You know, and a few other places in Georgia I've visited, slave cabins. You know, but Louisiana, I've seen video footage of a plantation. I mean, that I'm not talking about like that, those commercial plantations. I'm talking about plantations that are not even places that you could visit as a tourist, that are so expansive. I mean, it's incredible how expansive a lot of those that area where those slave cabins still exist. And I'll try to post that into the chat forum so that you can see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just
There's one. My dad was born there. My grandfather lived there. It's on all their paperwork. It says Panola Plantation, and my grandmother died there. So I reached out to try to find records. Not one government agency has any records. The university doesn't have records. I called the Panola Plantation, but they don't return any of your phone calls because they changed ownerships, you know. But no one seems to know how to get information on that. It's ridiculous. It's pretty hard.
Pamela, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just Googled slave narratives in Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
and it says in what's called theadvocate.com. The title is, you might want to just Google it, but it says Southern University plans to add 50 more slave narratives to its online collection. Southern University in Louisiana, excuse me. So you might want to go to Southern University. This is an article in The Advocate. It looks like they've been doing it.
Yeah, I've been
For
talking
the
to
state.
one of the professors there. He's been emailing me back and forth. He was pretty shocked too. He's trying to find and research it to figure out where are the records for this plantation, since no one seems to have it. It's so difficult. I can't believe no one has these records. Somebody has those records somewhere. It exists.
Yep, hopefully, okay.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they can help me out. They actually got back with me last week, and he's so intrigued now because he says, now it's a mystery for me. I'm going to dig down and I'm going to find this, you know. So it's on my dad's military draft papers. It's on all their paperwork. So it exists. Okay. And from what I understand, Panola Plantation was one of the first plantations, and it was supposed to be the biggest plantation. So I'm sure it exists. It has to have something.
Right. Well, as the prince says, keep it up.
Exactly.
For
you know,
all of us. For all
the
of
name,
us.
the name Panola rings bells in Georgia. You know what I'm saying? I'm not from Georgia. I was born and raised in New York, but Panola is rings bells in Georgia. So I honestly believe that there are some connections there with a lot of these places.
Brother Justin, Gaman Peno, Lion for Nangembi. So I had to say in family language. So I just told him that I I thank him for his work, and I wish him to take his work and move forward. So that's pretty much what it is. Lion for Nangembi, meaning I'm giving you all the strength to continue with your work, because it's gonna help the community. You know, in African tradition, anything you do needs to help the community. You cannot be selfish. So great work, man. That was well put together, and you touched, as our brother was saying, our brother Prince was saying, you touched on so many different aspects of this journey that we can sit here for 2 days talking about it. Now, I do have maybe 2 questions for you. Are you ready for me?
I think so. I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay. Like I said, very interesting, man. But you said that when you visited that area where they were pretty much, I don't remember what museum it was, but I'm talking about a museum where they actually had those little houses, like slave houses, right? Yet you show some pictures, those little, and then you say that people were going there. You got mad because people were actually going there, taking selfies and pictures and celebrating a wedding, even celebrating a wedding over there at that plantation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So my question to you is, now those people that you saw doing it, what race were there?
1 second. I was trying to see if I could pull back up that screen. Let's see. You're talking about here, right? You said what race were they?
Yeah, those people that you saw actually doing.
Okay, so let's talk about it. So this wasn't a museum. This was an actual slave plantation. This is where people were actually enslaved. It's called Boone Hall Plantation. And so these houses, and I said, why are these so well built? Because the image in my mind, I was thinking of like wooden shacks, but these were built seemingly pretty nice. Yeah. The enslaved at this plantation in Charleston, they were brick makers. They made bricks. And the bricks that they made, basically, if you walk in the streets of Charleston and those historic streets and you see the bricks in the middle of the street, these enslaved people made those bricks. They made those bricks. So the people who I saw were mostly young white people, and then also it was groups of large groups of white people doing tours. And so they would go inside the house, and they toured inside the house to marvel at the beauty of the antebellum South, the structure of the house, the gardens. They were taking pictures, and people do weddings. It's a thing of beauty. And then off to the side, you see these homes, you know, and they say, oh yeah, these were where the workers lived. But that's, to answer your question, that's who it was. Mainly white people. My wife and my family, we were the only black people there. And of course, I didn't go inside the house. I had no ambitions of going inside the house. I didn't want to go near the house. I just wanted to see the plantation, the enslaved houses, not the big house. But they were inside the big house taking pictures as well, you know. So
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks, man. That's actually what I was thinking. Yeah. Now, my second question to you is, many times you use the term person of color, right? I guess that's the term that's used over here in the US to refer to quote unquote black people. Now, I just want to.
What term? What term did you say?
Person of color. People
Person of color. Right. POC. Right.
Yeah, POC. Yeah. So that term it's used to pretty much categorize who we are as a million people, right? So I guess that's what it is.
So are you asking or saying?
Yes. So I just want to confirm that when we use that here, so when that term is used, there's the term of people of color,
right,
or person of color. I only hear it over here in the US. In Cameroon, we don't have that. So
my understanding of that is, okay, as I said, these are created terms. Yeah. They rebranded us. So during the time of Jim Crow and segregation, you would have white only water fountains, colored only water fountains. So they're calling us colored. They called us colored. And so now I guess as of recently, it's a movement to where people are identifying as a person of color, which I reject that term. I don't subscribe to. Don't call me a person of color or color, because that's a racist name used in the racist Jim Crow in the segregated America to designate a group of people based on what they wanted them to be. But our people never created that title. It's a racist title, in my opinion.
Yes. I'm very big about how, terminologies, usually how somebody or a thing is being defined, or a name that you give to somebody or you give to something. Now, when I look at this term person of color or people of color, there is a term in there that's very determinant. To me, it's the term color, right? Now, I'm just thinking about when I heard this word. Now, listen, I was lucky to go to many European countries, right? I visited almost like, I would say maybe 8 to 9 European countries, right? And different ones, going from France, Spain, Romania, Sweden, where else? It's Italy, right? Now, when you go to Romania, and you go to places like Sweden, which is like North Europe, like the skin complexion, the white skin complexion of somebody from Romania and somebody from for instance, Sweden, it's totally different. People in the north tends to be more pale, right? You go to a country like Norvegia, over there, they're more pale. Now you go to Italy, those guys literally, that's why in Italian people are called the blacks of Europe, because they have more kind of tinted skin, right? So that means even in the white race, they have color shades. So, but they're not going to call themselves people of color, because when you go in Europe, you can clearly see that when you go from France to Romania to a country like Russia, Italy, I mean, all the shades, all the skin also has different shades, even though they're quote unquote white, even though they're not white, because we know what's white. I have a white paper here. This is a white paper, so they're not white. But anyway, Now, that being said, in the European continent, they also have different shades, but they won't call themselves people of colors. In the black race, quote unquote, yes, of course, we have melanin, and the melanin comes reflects in our skin with different shade as well. Now, they're gonna call us people of color. How come we are people of color and they're not? I'm just throwing that question out there, and maybe we can think about that and bring some answer next time. Yes, I will have just one more observation, and that's probably going to be like maybe a question for you too. Now, you used the term black was used, and I just realized that in my own native tongue, which is Nufi, one of the Bamileke language, to say black, we don't have any word that will refer to anything that's black. We will always refer to something in nature that will have the, I would say, how can I say that? That will have the property of something that's dark in general. Like we would say in Fefe, we would say in the field, we would say in C, in CC, in CC. It means something that's too strong and dominant. That's how we refer to black. There is no word, there is no African word. I mean, as far as Bamileke, we don't have any specific word for the color black, but we just refer, the way we're saying it, we refer in CC, meaning something that became so strong and became dominant. That's why we refer to blackness as the dominant, as something that's always there. As a matter of fact, in our spirituality system, we say that black never disappears, it's always there. When you go in a light, when you go in a room, that room has no light, it's at night. You turn on your light, and your light is lighting on the room. It doesn't mean that the dark has left. No, it just means that your light bulb is actually hiding the darkness, but the darkness is always there. So that's how we refer to black. So something that's dominant is always there, and we use the word sinsi. So that being said, I'm asking now, is it the reason why they can never find proper way to define who we are? Because they're doing these things without looking in our mother tongue or how we call it? Do you think that's the problem? That they don't want to go and question these indigenous people to find out how they will call it themselves?
I think the problem is that we were thoroughly brainwashed. That means we were empty, and we were filled with what they wanted to fill us up with. So the identities that they put on us, we didn't necessarily create those. These are identities that they created for us and that we just blindly accept. The same with Negro. Some people love, Negro was a big thing. Marcus Garvey loved that word Negro. Negro is just Spanish for black, ultimately the same thing. So Negro, colored, black, African American is what we try to take back for ourselves. But I think it's because ultimately in the diaspora, majority of us don't know our tribal affiliation or our African lineage. We don't know that history. I didn't know that history until I took the African ancestry DNA test. So we could easily identify as African, we're African, but when we get specifically, we were robbed of that. We don't know that. So I think once we learn our tribal affiliation, we will identify by that. But until then, we're going with what they have called us for centuries. And so as far as not looking into our indigenous cultures to finding that proper name, is that we don't know where to look. My research before I took the test, I was adamant that my ancestors are going to be traced back to Angola, because that's where I was reading most came from in Georgia. Most people were taken from Angola. And so I could have submerged myself into an Angolan culture, that tribe, that name, but ultimately, it's really a shot in the dark. We don't know. So I think without knowing, to come together as a collective We agree to be called blacks. Black combines all of us. It basically gives us an identity that we want to create, even though I still think that it's not an African identity, it's a created one. But that's the reasoning, because we don't have the tribal affiliations, we don't know where to look, in my opinion.
The crazy thing is that Angola may be correct as well, because you have Africans from so many different ethnic groups being brought together during the transatlantic trade. You had people from Congo, which is Angola. Angola was like basically the center of the Kingdom of Congo. You know, you have Angola, you have Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of Congo, and those places right there. And some people even say Cameroon fell under the Kingdom of Congo. And I've DNA tested people from Cameroon, and when I look on sites like GEDmatch, they match people from Congo. So there was definitely some interaction there. Gabon, you know, and those places like that, they fell under the Kingdom of Congo. Yeah, people from the Upper Guinea region, from Mali all the way down to Liberia, which is Mali, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Liberia, you know, that whole coast, that whole Upper Guinea coast. You have Africans from that region. You have Africans from Congo. You have Africans from that they call the Slave Coast, which is Benin, you know, the Biafra, which is Nigeria and part of Cameroon. All of those different Africans mixed with each other. You can't pinpoint and say that all of my ancestors came from this particular tribe or this particular ethnic group, because all of them were brought to the Caribbean, and then they were brought over to America, and so on and so forth. They all mixed with each other. They even had breeding grounds where, you know, after the trade was banned legally, they still had, you know, I'm having trouble trying to find a word, a breeding grounds where they actually had Africans from different ethnic groups mix with each other, have relations with each other, and their children were still enslaved after slavery ended, you know, after they stopped the transatlantic slave trade by boat. It still existed. They were still able to have breeding programs where the children were still born and classified as slaves.
Mm-hmm.
So you have people from all different ethnic backgrounds, from Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, Gabon, you know what I'm saying, Senegal, Mali, Gambia. All of these people were mixed together in the Americas, in the Caribbean, Jamaica, United States. All these people were mixed together. You know, people from the United States are not, or Jamaica or Haiti. They're not all one people. They're not all one ethnic group. They're all a combination of many ethnic groups that mixed with each other due to the transatlantic human trade.
Right. And if I can get back to Brother Monte just 1 second, something just hit me about your question of why we accept these names and not search into our indigenous culture to find a proper identity. I have to tell you, if I'm being 100% honest with you, from what I've seen from people born in the diaspora in America, many do not see themselves as African per se. So when they talk about Africans and Africa, they look at them as they're totally different people, different culture. They're saying like, that's not us. We're American. We have a different culture. So many will be reluctant to identify as African. I remember growing up, I have strong features. Growing up, one time, they tried to joke on me saying, you African looking, you know, blah, blah, like it's an insult to say that I look African, but I'm saying I actually am African, and so are you. So I think and that's the result of that brainwashing that I mentioned. I think once we finally get from under the spell, and the spell was that they didn't want us to know that we are the same, because then we would join, then we would connect, then we would realize how many of us it is in numbers in relation to those who have oppressed us. You know, they don't want that. They want to keep us separated. So I think once we realize that we are African, which is why I titled my presentation "Reclaiming My Identity," I think then we'll take positive steps back to actually being who we actually are, and not being who they claim we are. I hope that helped answer that question.
I
Yes.
have another question, if you don't mind, when the brother's finished, because he's not finished.
No. Actually, I'm finished. Hey, it's priority to the queens here. Hey, I'm going to shut my mouth and you go ahead.
This is just so interesting today. This brother is so young and he has so much knowledge. It's amazing, you know, really, really amazing. I'm just curious as to, there's so many people who are actually on the Native American rolls. Some of my ancestors were on there, and I know they came from Africa. What do you say about that? I mean, what is your outlook on that?
I started writing another book. I didn't finish it, but I was looking at the historical documents of the Cherokee, specifically the five civilized nations. And if you read their creeds, their what's the word I'm looking for? Not their creed, but basically their laws, for lack of a better word. And you read like the sections in the articles, man, they're saying things such as, you know, no African will be granted citizenship in the nation whatsoever. They're looking at us as slaves. They're more of aligning with the Europeans and enslaving us. And it's like, now I can't speak for all, but I'm saying for these major civilized tribes like the Cherokee, if you go back, and this is not me saying my opinion, I'm just saying you can read the documents for themselves for what they were saying, their own laws. They were not willingly accepting us unless we were slaves. And they had, you know, slave patrols as well in those nations. So I know that many people, especially going to Florida, they were escaping slavery. They did join with some Native American tribes, such as the Seminoles. And so everyone is different. That's why I said specifically the Cherokee. So, but my thing is this. There is a lot of people who, like, when I was visiting that monument in Alabama, the lynching memorial, one of the guys pulled me to the side because I asked him, I was like, hey, brother, what do you think where are they going to find this history about these lynchings? And I want to know so I can research slavery for myself. And, you know, I want to use the same system they use. And he pulled me to the side and he was like, come here, young brother. Man, the slave trade didn't exist. He said, we were already over here. They were enslaving. We're Native Americans. We're not Africans. Basically, was what he was saying. He said, where are all the slave ships if that's the case? Why can't we find any slave ships? We're not Africans. The Africans sold us. So he's spewing the same rhetoric, the same ignorant rhetoric. And my thing is, yes, okay, we know that Mansa Abu Bakr II in the 1300s, almost 200 years before Christopher Columbus, he was the king of Mali. We know that he traveled to the Americas almost 200 years before Columbus. We know that Dr. Ivan Van Serta wrote a book called They Came Before Columbus. We know that Africans did travel over here first. We know that we were here already. But my thing is, I think that people are so ashamed, and this is just my personal opinion. Now, I think people are so ashamed with being African. They take on these other identities because when you say African, if you look at history, how they educate us, it's really is really cast in a negative light. They make it seem like it's nothing honorable about being African. Africans were slaves, savages. They sold our own people. But if you look past that bubble that they keep African history trapped in from 1400 till now, if you look past that bubble, you'll see that Africa is the origin of all civilizations, of all religions, of everything that we know. So my thoughts about that is that I think people are ashamed of being African. But yes, there were Africans in Native America accepted in tribes and accepted in certain tribes. But I will argue that I knew that the Native Americans knew that they were different, that we weren't necessarily the same. And many Africans were enslaved by Native American tribes. And many tribes, like I said, were slave patrols, and they were capturing the runaways and bringing them back to the European, plantation owners. So it's just interesting history when I was researching that, because I had those same questions. And when I was reading their laws, I was really shocked, a little hurt, but really shocked to see that they had the same mindset that the Europeans had. And I'm like, but they enslaved you first, but you take their side. Your ancestors did, you see. So yeah, I would just advise, if you're ever bored, just read the Cherokee, I can't find the word, but it's basically like their laws. It was like
It's
the
their
1840s.
bylaws. It's their bylaws. I read it too, and they're very disrespectful.
Very. So you have read it. Very disrespectful.
They for me, I have some on Cherokee, Choctaw, and Seminole. All are verified. They're all there. And so they asked me if I wanted to join. I'd have to send in proof. And I said, what proof? I'd have to send all the way back. I went all the way to 1800 with my proof, but I don't want to be a part of that, because I know my ancestors and who they were. They probably got on that list because they wanted to get the heck away from slavery. That's my thought. They wanted to get away from slavery, and they wanted to be something other than a slave. So a lot of them got on these roles and they identified, hey, this is who I am now. Maybe the white people will leave me alone. That's what I'm thinking happened. And I'm going to take that and run with that, because I can't believe that my ancestors really believed that they were Indians, because they weren't. They were Africans who were enslaved here, who got on Native American roles to survive. And now, since they got on those roles to survive, they set it for everybody else to get on those roles to survive and get money from that government, get financial support from that government. But a lot of people don't know how to do that, and the ones that do, we really don't want it. We want it to be known as who we really are, because the person called me and asked, do I want to be a part of it? Submit this, submit that. Yes, I see your ancestor here. They couldn't lie to me and tell me mine wasn't, because they were there for real. And I got their paperwork, birth certificates from my mom to her, that connected to her mother, and just paperwork to show who these people are, to show that I'm related to them. I don't want that. I want them to know we're African. This is who we are. I want my kids to know the truth about who they are. I want my kids to know, hey, your great ancestors got on those roles because they needed to survive. That's kind of like getting on welfare because you need to survive. It's the same thing, no different. And that's how I see it, and that's how I explain it to my kids, my grandkids, because I want them to know that that's the same as being enslaved still. It's the same as welfare that the government is throwing to you hey, come get this money, but we're going to control you. No, you're not going to control me. If I'm going to be a part of a tribe, it's going to be my own tribe that I form, and the government is going to acknowledge this tribe of who I am and back away and leave us alone, because this is who we are. And that's, I think, what a lot of Africans here in America should do. They should take on their native tribes and tell these people, this is who we are. And you can't touch us, because you stole us. We're from the diaspora. You stole us. We're here, but we're connecting to who we are, and we want you to get away from us. Pretty much, this is what, if we came together, boy, we'd be strong.
And beautifully said. I agree.
And thank you so much. Your knowledge is amazing. You're an amazing, bright young man. I'm in my 60s. You're amazing, and I appreciate you for what you're doing. And I wish you would do a little bit more for your brothers and sisters out there to give them the knowledge, because it's in you, you know. And I'm sure when you walked on that plantation, you probably felt your ancestors' pain. That's why you didn't want to walk in there, you know. And your knowledge is so amazing. I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a small question. But before I ask the question, I want to thank you for the presentation. It's really great to get deep into all those topics and to feel, I felt the emotion from the beginning, and I'm really thankful that I could listen to you. Now, my first question is, what do you think about reparations? Do you think it's a good idea, or do you have anything to suggest as a way to repair the past mistakes or trauma? So that would be my first question. My second question is, I think African American is not such a bad expression to call the Black people in the US, because if you look in Africa, you might have some people who are mixed tribes, 2 tribes, 3 tribes, but you rarely, now it's becoming more common because people travel a lot, but you rarely see people who are a mixture of 10 tribes, 8 tribes. And this is what is, most African Americans are a mixture of all Africa. And it's sad that it happened that way through slavery, but at the same time, there's a beauty in it. That means African Americans are, I would say, more as entitled to call themselves Africans as Africans on the continent. And they have something unique in them, or you have something unique in you, which is you have a bit, you can claim all the continent. Despite the difficulties, you created something new, taking a bit from everywhere. And this is wonderful. And as an African, I think it's also something I look at and I get inspiration from. So I think there's a reverse. You can see also when we were colonized, we got a lot of inspiration from the fight from African Americans to also fight our own battles. So your fight, even though there's many things that happened that was really bad and suffering, the good thing about what I can see now that is the bright side of the outlook we can have is that we can, through our own battles, we can all come together and be stronger, learn from our battles, learn from our sufferings, how we went through that, how we overcome, how our ancestors did. And then from that, we can get the new confidence to go ahead. And this so makes me really happy about what we can achieve together. So yeah, this is just a bit of a remark, but the question is then, how is now people who find out their African connections in the US or in the Caribbean, do they feel, after going to Africa, do they still feel the same? Or do you think some people, they might go to Africa and feel like they are totally different? Or do you sometimes feel like there's a connection? Even before going to Africa, do you feel like learning about Africa, you see connection and links between the way, even if you discover that you have Bamileke connection, like you are from the Bamileke tribe originally, as a certain percentage, do you see some features, even in terms of behaviors, that was transmitted despite all the challenge that was transmitted from generation to generations?
I'll answer that question in part, and then I'll leave that one to the Prince here, because he actually traveled back to the continent several times. He actually has reconnected with several different tribes. So, but to answer that question, you gave me 3 questions. If I traveled to the continent, no, I wouldn't feel any different, because we literally look the same. We look the same. When I start speaking, you know, maybe you will be able to tell then, but as far as how we look, our mannerisms. I feel like it's in our DNA. It's in the same. And a lot of things that we do in the diaspora, we don't subconsciously, we don't know that those things came from Africa. They came from Africa. Brother Monte was going into some of the dances that we do in the diaspora. You can trace those same dances back to Africa. We go into the musical instruments, certain way that we sing and certain way that we play certain instruments. That goes back to Africa. So I wouldn't feel any different. I would feel at home. I would feel overwhelmed. I probably would start crying. I don't know how I would feel, but it wouldn't be bad. I would be, in Christianity, they talk about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit gets into you and you just become kind of possessed through emotions. I would essentially get the Holy Spirit of my ancestors, pretty much. And yeah, I would break down. I would be ecstatic. I would be ecstatic. And I can't wait to feel that. Reparations. So to me, that question is, to me, when we talk about reparations, I think the issue is we're trying to get reparations for every single thing, everything that you did to us, for slavery, for whatever. I think that we're entitled reparations to so many separate issues. Like slavery can be for one. That can be one for reparations. And it was kind of issued, at the end of the Civil War in the Sea Islands in Georgia and South Carolina. They were the former plantations. That land and that property was given to the enslaved who worked who worked those properties. 40 acres and a mule. Abraham Lincoln, the president, gets assassinated. The new president comes into play. He takes that land from them and gives it back to the plantation owners. Okay, so reparations for slavery, yes, we need it. The question is, how do we know who's entitled to reparations? Some people look at this question selfishly. They're so selfish. They're saying, well, look, only the people born in America should get reparations and, no one else. They're creating dissension in the conversation, making it almost impossible. If we're being honest, every African worldwide should get reparations because we've all been done wrong at some point. But if we're talking about America specifically, I think it's at a point now where we're almost begging for money. And I think that can be shameful in a way. To me, reparations will be, how about we stop telling lies in the American classrooms and we educate our children on true history? How about that for reparations? Or we could talk about the prison problem. We're like 13.8, 14% of the American population, but the majority of the inmates in prison, and many people are falsely, incarcerated. They need reparations. So it's the Black Wall Street massacre. A lady, 107 years old, she survived the Black Wall Street massacre. She just made a speech in DC talking about reparations for Black Wall Street. They still haven't gotten reparations for that. And 300 to 3,000 people are killed. And this lady's 107 years old telling you, you still haven't given me any help. We need reparations. So I think it's at a point now that as far as reparations goes, obviously, and I wrote about this in the book. I wrote about this in my book. COVID-19 hit, stimulus checks get sent out like very quickly. $1,200 to you if you have a kid, $1,200. They sent that out quick. They found that money and sent it out quick. If they wanted to do reparations, financial reparations, they could easily give us money. Obviously, you see how they just pull money from COVID-19. You see how they pull money to construct these museums or so forth, millions and millions of dollars. So if they wanted to give us reparations, we would have gotten reparations. I think it's at a point now we're spending too much time on false hope. We have to realize who we're dealing with. And we can realize who we're dealing with by looking at how they treated us historically. And you think now that they're going to give us money. If they didn't give us money then, why they gonna give us money now? They have so many different arguments. So I don't spend too much time on reparations unless we're talking about something specifically, such as Brother Moncan was telling me about the Bamileke massacre that happened. Okay, they should get reparations for that. for that massacre. You know, that's something specifically we can game plan. We have a target we can focus on. But here in America, sadly to me, reparations is basically all talk. It's all talk. Now, you said about African American, you think that's a good identity. Like I said, I agree with African American only because, yes, I am an American citizen and they put Africa first. So I can agree with that, especially more than I can agree with person of color or colored or American descendant of slavery. Those I reject. And depending on how I'm feeling that day, I may reject black too, because, you know, looking at the definition of the word, it's not something that I agree with. But I'm just saying African American is a created terminology. It was created recently. It's created. We allow other people to create titles for us and we run with it. Create a title for yourself is what I'm saying. And for myself, I know where my ancestors came from. I know they were living life in Africa before they came to America. I know they wanted to separate us for some reason, you know, so I identify as African. And as I said, I'll relate back to the Prince about that feeling of when you go to Africa, how you felt. I haven't experienced it yet, but you know, he has, so he should be able to give you more insight on how he felt once he got his new name, one of his several new names. You know, from my understanding, you have 2 or 3 names, correct, from different tribes.
Yes, I have several. I've found that ancestry from the Bamileke, the Tikar, the Airway, the Igbo, the Ijaw. There's so many different African relatives that I've connected with through DNA. When I hear the word reparations, I hear the word repair. And it's more than just monetary, you know, it's educational wise, you know. Reparations goes deep beyond just a monetary compensation for what our ancestors have been through, of what or what those European colonial powers have put our ancestors through. You know, our educational system needs to be revamped, which I doubt it will ever will be to the point to where we experience total self-dignity from the information that we learn. But my experience traveling to Africa, I've been to 6 African countries. And even Egypt, you know, which is in North Africa, when I went there, everywhere I went, once I touched down, you know, Egypt was a little different, you know, in West Africa, in Central Africa, they say, hello, brother, and all that other stuff. In Egypt, they say, hello, cousin. They call me cousin in Egypt, you know. In Egypt, they say, hello, cousin, you know, but at the same time, they still saw me as family, you know. I do have European ancestry. You know, I have some ancestry in England and in Scotland, but my DNA relatives in England and Scotland, when I've communicated with any of them, I've never heard any of them call me cousin or brother or anything like that. That's just up to this point right now. You know what I'm saying? And I've had a few reach out to me when I didn't have a profile picture, but it's like once they found out that I had some African ancestry, it was like they stopped communicating with me. You know, it was like the communication ceased. You know, I reached out to, you know, just playing around. I already knew. I said, this one brother who we shared a surname, and I said, hey, you know, I have that surname in my ancestry. I said, I'm just, you know, reaching out to you, whatever, blah, 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 blah. No response at all whatsoever, you know, and I knew he was Caucasian because I saw his profile picture, you know, but I find my connection and I consider all human beings, family. If you have love for me, I have love for you. But my family is amongst the Bamileke, the Tikar, the Airway, the Igbo, the Ijaw, the Idoma, the Efik, the Temne, the Mende. That's my family. You know what I'm saying? My mother, whose father is Scottish, my mother didn't even really know her father, because he died when she was young. My mother taught me that I was Black, and that's what I see myself as Black. My father is like Justin's complexion, you know what I'm saying, or Moncom's complexion. My father's maternal ancestry goes back to Cameroon, but my mother has predominantly Cameroon, Congo, and Benin ancestry, 50-50 with Scottish ancestry. But my mother always taught me that I was Black, and she always taught me that I had to, work harder to achieve things in life because of my Blackness. When you go to Africa, some of them made my complexion. You see me right now. All y'all can see me right here on the on the screen. Do I look white to you?
Not at all.
No.
Some people,
Not even close.
in Ghana would say I'm Obruni, or the word that they use for white. And some people in Cameroon would say LeBlanc, the white, But I do not have straight hair. Look at my nose. Look at my lips. You can see the brownness. You can see the redness or whatever. In Jamaica, where my family's from, they would call me Reds. They would call me Reds in Jamaica, because I'm not white. But when I was in Cameroon, when I was in Nigeria, when I was in Ghana, I felt at home, In America, I live here, but I do not feel at home, I feel at home. When I was in Cameroon, like I told y'all before on one of the other Zoom sessions, I was standing out in the street with t-shirt, shorts on, slippers. Nobody never bothered me. Nobody paid me any mind or any attention. When I was in Nigeria, everybody treated me as family and welcomed me with love. When I was in the Volta region of Ghana, everybody treated me with love. It was only when I was in the marketplace in the Accra area of Ghana that people would, was kind of treat me as like a foreigner, because of my light skin or whatever, my lighter skin. But I felt at home in all those places: Ghana, Cameroon, Benin, the high priest of Odun, his son, sent me a message. He was like, how did you, actually the high priest of Odun asked me how I liked Benin, if I was enjoying myself, if I felt at home. And I was like, yes, I did. And he was like, Benin is your home. Actually, everywhere in West Africa and Central Africa, I felt at home. And I actually felt more safe in West and Central Africa than I do feel in Georgia. And I'm from New York. I felt more safe in West and Central Africa than I felt in New York. In New York, certain neighborhoods you go to, like, man, I gotta tuck my chain. They might snatch my chain. I gotta watch. They might try to rob me in this area or that area. I didn't feel that way in Africa at all. So, I felt totally at peace in Africa, And that's where I hope to retire to retire or have a retirement home. You know, because I relocated to Georgia. I live in Georgia, but it just doesn't feel like home to me. You know, I was born and raised in New York City. New York City feels like home. Jamaica feels like home, but Georgia does not feel like home. And from what I've experienced growing up in America, I was born and raised in New York, first generation American. Being called nigger. I'm being called nigger to this day on my job, you know. And throughout the years, I've had working in nursing homes with patients, I'm passing their room and they go, "Hey, black man," you know, or calling me nigger and all types of stuff. So light-skinned people do not get a pass. I just want y'all to know that right now. Light-skinned people do not get a pass. We still get called the N-word. We still get called a black man and all that other stuff. And Africa, you know, that's the only place that I think I may have been called LeBlanc a time or two, or Bruni, and even brothers like Justin, his complexion, you know what I'm saying, may be called O'Bruni, you know, and they have a word for like a foreigner who's like from America or whatever. Even in Nigeria, they may call you another name, but it's similar to O'Bruni, where it's more not related to your skin complexion, but more or less related to you're a foreigner. They know that you're from America. You know, there's a word that they use for you there. But if you change your clothing, you know, in Nigeria, you have a lot of Igbos that's my complexion, you know, and that are lighter, you know. In Jamaica, they call them red Igbos. They call light skin. Back in the days, they used to call light skinned people red Igbos, you know, and today, even in Jamaica now, they may call me Reds because I'm light skinned. But, you know, Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Cameroon, that's where I felt most at peace and most at home. And I traveled to all those places because I found ancestry in all those places. And I was looking for to see which place that will receive me the most, that I could say, hey, this is my home. But, you know, I felt equally receptive in all of those places. I don't know if anybody would like to add on to that.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Brother Prince. I think this was it's always good to hear from you that you know you went to those different countries in Africa, and guess what? You're back alive. Nobody kidnapped you there and asked you some ransom as they're portrayed on TV all the time. So I think it's great that you're able to come like this and tell our brothers and sisters from here that, hey, actually I went to 3 countries there. Hey, guess what? I'm back in America. So just to kind of like tell all the people different kind of stories, compared to what's often being shown on TV. Oh, you're talking about Cameroon. Oh, they're killing each other. You're talking about Nigeria. Oh, Boko Haram is beheading people. Oh, they are putting all the girls in bandages there. They want to make you feel like over there is completely chaos, right? So at least you coming like this and explaining like that, it makes you give our brothers and sisters here the hope that, all right, you know what, I can actually go. I can pick whatever country and I'll go and I will come back. So that's good. Now, I would like to I have a question for you again, Brother Justin. And then after that, we will see if anybody has a question, and we're going to try to give you the floor so you can wrap this up. I know this conversation is very passionate, man. We have so many things to say. But I don't know if our sister Pamela is still here, but I would like to say something when it comes to the Native American, Black, or African challenge here in America, where, as a matter of fact, I actually do follow a group over here. I follow them on Instagram. They claim not to be African, but Native American. They don't want to do anything with African. I just want to set some facts over here, right? According to the journal, one of the journal that actually that devil called Christopher Columbus wrote, he said himself like one of the predominant tribe that he had to deal with here were called Blackfeet. Now he didn't even use the word tribe. He said group, because that group was including many tribes. It's like today the Bamileke, it's a group. In the Bamileke group, you got many tribes. I am Bafang. My brother Boris might be from Chang. So we have different tribes, but it's the same Bamileke group. So Christopher Columbus, he was referring to actually that the group called Blackfeet. Now, I'm asking a question. Why was he calling them Blackfeet if they were not black? That's the first question we need to ask ourselves. It is because, in fact, those so-called Native American or Native Indian, they were just like our complexion. They were black Indian. So that already tells you something about who they were, right? And the second fact is that, as my brother Justin says, Abubakar II, right? 200 years before, Christopher Columbus arrived in this land. It's actually facts of continuous collaboration between the African on the continent and those here in the Americas. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys heard about Timbuktu in Mali today. Timbuktu is a city of knowledge. So that's the first place where you have the first university of the world, where the Arabs and the European came to study, as they always studying from us. Now, Timbuktu, for more than 300 years, even 4, were continuously attacked by the Arabs, right? Because they were coming from the north and trying to change all those people from the Mali Empire into Islam. So it was a lot of fight between them and the Arabs, but eventually the Arab won. And all that place right now is all Islamic, right? Now, there is a university called University of Sankore, right? They have been able to save some of the ancient book of some of the old books, right, over there. And right now they're doing the work at Timbuktu to actually create some kind of library to save these ancient books. And in those books, look what they found lately. They found out that a lot of the African moving from the Manding Empire, which is the Mali Empire, all the way to the Americas, they have records of them going there back and forth many, many times. And the way they were calling them over there here, the way they were calling the brothers here in America, they say, we just went to our extended family. So they were referring to so-called Native American as the extended family. So that's why I say let's always come back and look at what our ancestors were saying, right? Because these are our ancestors in Mali who actually were traveling there, doing a lot of trading, right? Saying that they refer to them over there in Americas as the extended family, right? They actually have a word in Mali, in the Mandingo language, where they actually call them people of the sun. Some of the people of the sun. So, interesting. What does that say you about the identity of those people? So you might be called indigenous Indian, but that's what the white man label you. How does the African actually call you here from here, who you were here? So that's where I think they get mixed. They think because they have like straight hair, you know what I mean? They think because they have straight hair, they got a little bit more slanted eye and maybe some kind of like more, I would say, sharp nose. They think they don't look African. I'm asking them to go in places like Kenya or in a Omo land in Ethiopia. I'm asking them to go in Botswana. I'm asking them to go in a Zulu land and look at the facial feature of those people and compare with the Native American. You're gonna see that, it's just your people who travel there and stay there. So when we say Native American, we're talking about Africans, okay? Now, I also want to mention that the fact that some of the so-called Native American have put some African into slavery, let me tell you something. In the records that Abubakar II had with Native American here, It was never such things as conflict. Remember that the conflict always happened when the white men intervened. Okay, what does that tell you? I'm gonna say it again. For 200 years, African people on the continent are trading with those over here in America. They call him, now they're being called Native American. For 200 years, those trades, you never heard any war between them. You never heard that, oh, African were enslaved there. Otherwise, they would stop going there. So how come it's only when the white comes that now the Cherokees are now enslaving Africa? Didn't you see that something is wrong here in this thing? It is because they use the technique of divide to conquer. That's what they do. They're going to come and raise you against your own brother. They're going to come and raise you against your own sister. And you're finally going to start hating your sister because lies that was told to you. This is what they even do in Africa until today. You have this tribe now fighting against this tribe. In Rwanda, the Hutu and the Tutsi, they've been living there for centuries. They never fought. But the Belgian and the French had to came in the game for them to start killing themselves. Don't you see anything wrong with that picture? If they were so hating each other, how come before the European arrived, how come they were not killing themselves like that? So that means somebody came in your house. The devil came in your house and raised you against your own brother. So we have to be able to sort out who is the real devil here. Let's not start, oh, I hate, you hate me, I hate you. But let's find out, how did that happen? What is the root of this? And then so we can solve the problem. So I think, yeah, I wanted to cast that out, because even my own woman, my own queen, if you look at her, people usually say, oh yeah, I think she's Native American. I'm saying, well, it's because you never went to Africa. You have so many, even the sister Pamela, she looks just like my sister. I'm going to make sure I send you the picture. His name is Dorinel Chamu. She looks like her. I'm going to find one of the pictures. They have the same face. So sometimes when they're trying to make, oh no, you don't look like an African. You never went to Africa. It's like the Chinese. You look at the people in, there is this tribe called the San people in South Africa. You're going to know who are the ancestors of the Chinese. Okay? They just like, they have very, very sharp in the eye. They have so-called Chinese feature. But I would say Chinese has the feature because they're black. A yellow Chinese cannot create a black man, but a black man can create a yellow Chinese. So therefore, the people in Africa who have scented eyes are the ancestors of the Chinese. So I think it's because, again, our lack of knowledge of Africa and its people, we think these people right here are different. Oh, no, they're not African. But anyway, but I would say again, let's not force anybody who doesn't want to be African. And I always say, they're in shame because Africa right now is losing. It's because Africa, it's a lot of, misery left and right. It's not as developed as America. Africa, even when we talk about voodoo, it's black magic. Nobody want to relate to that, right? That's why now they don't want to do anything with Africa, right? But I'm going to tell you right now, when Africa become what they are, those same people claiming not to be African, they're going to be begging to be accepted to be African. That's what's happening, So, brother, when we talk about reparation, to me, it's really an assault. Do you think they can really repay what they did to us? Can anybody put a price to what they've done to us? So that term reparation, again, to me is an assault. I don't want to very develop on that because I can write a whole essay on it. Because that reparation has nothing to do with money. Money cannot solve whatever it is. I don't care whatever. Take $1,000 million or billions. It will never solve what they've done to us. When I see my brothers and sisters here who lost their mother tongue, can you repair that with money? Is money can repair that? So yeah, that's another topic. I would call that compensation stimulus. Okay, so-called compensation stimulus. Then we might actually develop more on that. But Justin, let me come back to you very quick. Listen, I think the presentation that you actually made, as you can see, we're all passionately talking about it. it's opening a lot of avenues. It's opening a lot of questioning, right? We all trying to, just like us being born on the motherland, grew up there. Now we live here, right? But let me tell you something. I would say 80% of what you presented right now, no one in Africa know that. No one. We don't go to school and we study this. We don't go to school. They tell us exactly what happened to you here. They don't tell us that. How they label you in Africa, well, I would say in the curriculum in the school, is that okay? Well, you are sons and descendants of slaves. That's all we know. And they might tell us about you through to MLK, not even Malcolm X, but to MLK. And that's all we know. Oh, Black Americans descendants of slaves, and oh, Martin Luther King say they have a dream. I have a dream. That's what we know about you. So great job. And I think presentation like yours, we must find a way how we need to infuse this kind of teaching to the kids and the grown and on the motherland. Okay, it's going to be of a very, very, very great use for them, for us to know exactly what happened to you, so we can relate more to you. Okay. Now, if I may ask you a quick question and then maybe ask you to conclude, unless somebody has asked something to say, I'm gonna ask you. What I will ask you is, after doing this kind of research that you've done and presenting this, right? Where do you think you can be more effective, right, to bring the solution? Because we often talk about the problems, and it's great to talk about the problem because we need to find out what are the roots of the problems. So from your own opinion, do you have a draw of solutions, or are you already working on solutions that you believe they are solutions to correct our state of mind or to affect our community?
First, I'll say Oma Insanu to you. And next, I'll say that as far as solutions goes, for one, like I said, the book I wrote is entitled Uprooted. And I'm basically saying that our ancestors were uprooted from the continent, replanted into American soil. But it's time for us to uproot ourselves back and go back home, whether that be physically or mentally. So to correct this, I wrote a book with all this information. I distributed it out. I gave it to my relatives. People purchased it. Some people, I can tell they were moved by it. Other people probably didn't even read it, but I at least wanted to cement it and put it in a format to give it to them. So for one, I would say that's one thing that I did. I tried to put that information out there to kind of correct some of those lies. And for two, as far as the solution goes, off the top of my head, I can say this reconnection group, that's already one of the solutions. Now, it's already bridging the gap between us. We can share ideas, we can support each other, we can learn from each other and take that information back out to the community and help them out. So being in this group, I feel like I'm contributing to a solution. And likewise, I'm motivated. I could create an organization myself, and we can tailor it to the specific needs of our communities. But for me, it's all about re-educating our youth, because I know they're being brainwashed, and I just want to give them a message of the truth to combat these lies that are being told by professionals, by people who are being paid to teach. They're programming them to be slave-minded. And so my solution is giving them that information to first know that you're not a slave. Liberate your mind. And when you liberate your mind, I feel like the opportunities are endless. They're endless. You see yourself as so much more. You see Africa as so much more. And I don't want to put anybody on blast. I have relatives now who, after I learned my ancestry and I told them I'm reconnecting, a lot of them are very, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say cynical, but they're not necessarily supportive. They're like, why would you Why do you want to go to Africa? You're gonna end up, getting bitten by some bug. You're gonna get sick, or you're gonna, you're gonna get. You don't know anything about those folks, and you're gonna do this and that. And why do you want to? Like, this is a real thing. This is real. I'm telling you, brothers. I'm telling you, people are brainwashed. I'm telling you, people are brainwashed to the point where I present the information to them. They don't want to necessarily accept it. They're like, you just talking. What are you talking about? So each one teach one. My solution, whoever I come in contact with, I tell this to them. And the conversation can go left or right, but I'm going to feed you the information, and I'm going to for sure make sure my son and my children know this information. And that's my solution to break the psychological chains of slavery through education. So that's why I wrote the book.
Woo, man. Thank you so much, man. You just hit the core like of the actual solution, and especially what you said last. Doing the work first with your own offspring, making sure you break that cycle. That's powerful. That is powerful. And I think if we all here, it's because we are trying to re-educating ourselves, and we need to make sure that all the lies that were told to us, we will not shield from those lies. We find ourselves, we did the research. I'm sure all of us here, have done some kind of research, because in order for us to talk like this, listen, you need to get out of that school curriculum and do your independent research. So this is great, man. I definitely applaud you for that. Now, maybe one more question, please. Remember how I always say to you since the beginning that you are not descendant of slaves. You're descendant of the best they took from us. Now, what word do you think we can use to, because I'll tell you, I'm still learning English, okay? I'm trying to find a new word. I don't want to use the ever, and I even want to be the one, because I work for a big company. I work for BAE System. It's a big aerospace company, right? And sometimes, especially since they killed George Floyd, some corporation want to pretend now that they want to listen to us, right? Now, within my company, they have this body called ACE, African American for Excellence, something. And these people over there, they're always trying to be politically correct, right? And I see many articles that they always send to the company and labeling that things all us descendants of slaves. I turn red every time I read that, right? But I would like to go to them to propose them a different way to call ourselves. But I would like to go with them with a word. And I'm just trying to find a word that can replace that, knowing that you are descendants of the best that took from us. What word can you use for that? I mean, you don't have to answer now. I think all of us here maybe might think about it and give us some kind of, English word for it. What can be used?
I'll leave it open to hear everyone else's suggestions as well. But with me, I take issue with them labeling us on an experience. If anything, when people ask me, I'm African first. That's who I am. Our ancestors who were enslaved, guess what? They were Africans as well. In bondage, they were in bondage, yes. They were Africans. I can't emphasize enough, this slave term was created. They created that in their minds and then cast that on us, and we accepted it because we were miseducated and brainwashed and empty and filled with what they were using to educate us with. So we don't know anything else. Those people enslaved, they didn't know history. Well, some of them did. Some of them did. But if you read those narratives and you hear about the people who were born a few generations in America, during slavery, you can get their mindset. If you hear their mindset and some of the way that they think, you can tell all they know is a life of slavery. They were successful in creating that slave. So of course they will call themselves the slaves. They call themselves the NIGGERS. They call themselves that word too. So me personally, people are so adamant about putting labels on us and labeling us based off an experience. They ask me, I'm African first. My nationality, well, I'm an American citizen, yes. But in my DNA, I'm African. So that's what I would say. But you can't take that message to them because they don't identify as African. They identify as American descendants of slavery. So they'll be reluctant to take that message. But someone who knows the truth, an African, you are an enslaved African, enslaved. But I don't feel like that experience should be a label on you. You know what I mean? It was an experience. If anything, let's call them by their tribe, or if we don't know the tribe, like many cases we don't, we know that they were African. So that's what I identify as.
Yes, just
Brother, I just want to say this. You are blessed to, and we are all blessed to be in this group together. Brother, you have so many resources in this group from people who are from various Bamileke kingdoms and people who have already reconnected to various Bamileke kingdoms. You don't have to reconnect to my particular Bamileke kingdom, but I'm looking forward to seeing you reconnect and go to Cameroon and reconnect with the Bamileke kingdom. You know, and that will be a day of joy for me personally, to see you over there in Cameroon reconnecting with a Bamileke kingdom. It doesn't have to be with Bamenju. It doesn't have to be with anything that I've done, but I just want to let you know I am here for you to help you in any type of way that I can. And I'm sure everybody else is as well. Brother Justin, you know what I'm saying? I want to see you in Cameroon within the next 5 years. I'm stretching it out, but I would like to see you in Cameroon really within the next 2 years. When I first found out my ancestry, it took me 7 or 8 years before I went to Cameroon, and this was in 2007 when I first found my ancestry. And I was looking to go to some place on my maternal side, which was Sierra Leone. And at that time, they had the Ebola situation going on. I said, you know what? I have to go to Africa. You know what I'm saying? I think I was going to my in my early 40s, like my 40th birthday, so on and so forth. So I said, I have to go to Africa. And I ended up going to Ghana. And then after that, I ended up going to Cameroon. And at that time, when I found out my ancestry was from Cameroon, I never even heard of Cameroon. I never heard of Bamileke. I never heard of Tikar. But I tell you, to this date, even after going to Ghana and the various places, the strongest reception I've received to date was from Cameroon. The Tikars and the Bamileke, you will be well received, Brother Justin, when you go back to Cameroon. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. Thank you.
Definitely,
Thank you, brother.
definitely.
Thank
You'll be
you.
coming back, Prince, and with your new name.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yes, this is awesome. So yeah. So sister, yes, I see Sister Camila is back. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure maybe next time I have to take the pictures. I have to take a picture of my sister. You're gonna same face. So when they say you were Native American, I don't know. It's because they don't know African. They don't know. If they go in Africa, they see the tribes. They're gonna see that we. So yeah, it's just people.
I was looking at I was watching at Justin's wedding's video, and then I see some screenshot. I sent him the screenshot, and I said, Justin, I see some people in here, they look Bamileke. I wouldn't, they wouldn't need to have a test DNA to I mean, if I probably saw them the screen, I was going to say that, what part of Bamileke are you from? That's why we asked. When a Bamileke person sees another Bamileke person, the first thing is going to ask, what part of Bamileke are you from? Are you Bamenju? Are you Bafang? Are you Batufam? Are you this? So I've sent back the picture to Justin, and I told him that them two people, they look Bamileke. And then he told me that obviously they're his cousin from his mom's side. That's where he got his Bamileke DNA. So it wasn't a question because you have so many cousins on the video, but the two because that I actually choose was the one I thought that there was Bamileke, and obviously there was Bamileke just like you. Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is why this page is great, because we're going to together, you know, share information like this so we can push away all these lies that were told to us. And I'm actually working right now with my extended family, so-called Native American group, to really make them understand. But I'm not forcing them. I talk to them anytime they want to listen. I'm not going to force them to accept what they don't want to accept. You know, I always say, you can't run away from your own shadow. You know, you can deny your shadow with your mouth, but you cannot run away from it. You know, it's always going to follow you. You know, so but yeah, man, this is great. I thank you again one more time. I know right now it's this discussion is pretty late, and I don't know if you have any closing word, Justin, but or if anybody has another comment to make before we finally close and you know, take an appointment for next Sunday. But yep.
As far as
No.
closing, I would just close by saying that although they tried to make it seem like it's a curse, it's really a blessing to be African. Something that I had to come in to learn myself, but I fully embrace. And it's also a blessing that this group, this platform is created so that we can connect. Without this group, I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't have known where to necessarily start. But you guys made it very easy for me to just jump in and get all this knowledge, you know, from you guys. So I really enjoy learning from you all. I really appreciate your attention, you know. I really appreciate your attention. And
Microphone. Can this guy hear him?
No, just your microphone. I think he has a connection problem, like a Wi-Fi connection.
So I'm definitely gonna say thanks to Sister Pamela. First time I think. So thanks for
Yes.
joining.
Thank you. Send me another link so I can continue to come.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. I'll definitely
Absolutely.
do that. Yeah,
It was amazing class. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, you have some good questions, you know, that's what we want. You know.
So sis Pamela, I should have been your call you sis. I should call you mother, mom. Yes, because
thank you.
Not just your age, but it's because you know you have grandkids. So in African tradition, we actually call you, we give you a title. You know, the title you become Muvu. Muvu means that, you know, you become the mother, you become like the queen mother, but not really the queen of the title, but you become a very important person in a family tree because you already have grandchildren. Yeah.
Wow. And how do you pronounce that again?
Muvu.
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 It's MEVEUN.
Yeah, Muvu. Yeah, yeah, you can say it like that.
I learned something today. I learned a lot today.
There you go.
I learned that I look like someone in your family, right? I'm gonna have to see this picture. Huh?
Yes, next time. I just don't have. I need to look at my phone. My sister, that's my second youngest sister. I'll share her picture. You will see her face in your face. I mean,
she might be my sister.
Yeah. So yeah, sometimes when I heard these people talk about, oh no, Native American don't look like African, I say, where have you been in Africa before you say that? You know.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's just
it makes no sense. They say that a lot here in America, like they don't feel that they're from Africa. Where you feel that you're from? Where do you think you came from? You know, you may talk differently, your ways may be different, but that is where you're from, you know?
I think one of the factors that make them saying it, right? Because I follow some of them and I have a conversation with them. It's on their hair texture, right? They don't realize that there's so many tribes in Africa that actually have, you know, black, long, and then like hair, like, you know, a little bit. They don't realize it. It's because those people don't travel. They don't research Africa, right? And that's why I always ask them, if they go see the Omo people in Ethiopia, if they go see the Afar people in Ethiopia, they're gonna shut their mouth. These people have the hair just like Native American. What are you talking
Absolutely.
about?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Even in
It's
Cameroon,
actually they have beautiful hair.
yes. In Cameroon, you see the Wadabi tribe, called also the Bororo tribe. The
Mhm.
Bororo tribe. They have hair just like the Native American. So I asked them, like, what have
That's
you been
true.
in
They
Africa
do.
before you
Yeah.
make that statement? Yeah. Yeah. So, but this is our job to kind of like expose them and tell them what it is. And obviously, we're not going to force them to listen. We're just going to tell them if they want to listen one day, they listen. If they don't, if they want to remain for whatever reason, they're ashamed to be called African, as our brother Justin said, because a lot of them really, I don't care what kind of proof you're going to show in front of their face, they don't want to do anything with Africa because they're ashamed to be called African. Okay. Even in did you know even in Cameroon, some of us are ashamed to be called by the native name. Some of us home too are brainwashed to the point where they don't want you to call them by the African name because for them it sounds too African. The man was born in Cameroon, his mother from Cameroon, but yet he or she don't want you to call her or him by his African name. So it's the same kind of mindset, right? It has nothing to do with facts. They already made up their mind based on being shameful who they are. And that's what the problem is. Such person, you cannot force them to
Right. Brainwashed. When
Yeah.
when you take them out of that mindset, it changes everything in their whole surrounding. It changes everything.
Eh,
Yeah, because
Exactly.
people would say, "Hey, you're black," and I would hold up a crayon. Do I look like this? You know, do you look like this? No one's black. It's a color. That's not who we are. You know, so I tell people, don't call me that. You know, I'm an African person here in America. This is who I am. And I think that a lot of people here need to really realize, and even there too, realize what your ancestors went through. They went through so much suffering for us today. And I think that we need to show more gratitude and appreciation for our ancestors, for real.
You just hate another topic right there. We're gonna talk about it.
Good talk.
Ancestry, yeah. Brother Justice know how hard I am with that. He knows. I already told him a little bit. Don't forget your ancestors. They're your angels. Don't forget about them.
Yes,
Yeah. They're your angels.
I agree.
Yes. So, why do you think? Let me say you something.
Oh,
I know
shit.
this is gonna be another
Très
discussion.
bon, compte bancaire.
You want to say something, brother Boris?
Oh,
Hello?
You want to say
go ahead,
something?
please.
No, I wanted to say, I might wrap up soon, but I wanted to say thank you to everyone. I really enjoyed the discussion with all of you guys. And if you need tips if you plan to go to Cameroon, we can actually go together.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I have to go to bed now.
I want to thank the brother for a nice presentation. It was very informative. I want to welcome Sister Pamela to the group and to the family. And
Say-
every Sunday we
Marvin.
do this.
Say Mugu, Pamela. Say Mugu.
Marvin
Mugu.
Pamela.
Every Sunday we've been doing this. So come back next Sunday. Stay on the Facebook page. Stay in the WhatsApp chat.
I'm not on the Facebook page. Maybe you guys can send me a link or
Are
something.
you on the WhatsApp, Sister Pamela?
Okay.
Are you on the WhatsApp?
Broadcast.
Yes.
Okay.
Moncom Broadcast.
Moncam
And-
Broadcast, that's the page.
Yeah.
What is
And
it?
stay.
Can you say it again?
Moncam Broadcast. SMONKAM Broadcast.
And stay in the chat group too on WhatsApp. And you'll know about all of the Zoom sessions that we do, and we've been doing them for the past few Sundays. I suggest going on the Facebook page and looking back at some of the other broadcasts that we have had over the past couple of weeks. Very informative.
I found out through the United House Ancestors.
Oh, you can check it on YouTube. YouTube is
Mhm.
Moncam Broadcast.
Absolutely.
Moncamp Broadcast YouTube. So
yeah, somebody actually wrote it on the chat, on the text here, so you can see how it's spelled on. Yeah. Nice.
All right, so again, I'm gonna say thanks again to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Prince Legacy. Just so it was nice again. Thanks again, Prince Eloni.
Thank you.
You always refresh and bring us a lot of information and everything. Brother Justin, that was just amazing. I would love you to keep that presentation, because when we do end up in Cameroon, you need to present that to the kid over there in school. You know, I never had the opportunity to learn about our history when I was young in school. You know, something like that. The kid over there, they need to know that. Just like Brother Monty.
Thank you, Brother Justin.
Thank you all. As Brother Monte would say, Inje Pupu, Papa. Am I saying it right?
Sleep good.
In Mende we say.
He's only say good night.
In Mende we say Bisia Kaka, Bisia
Kaka.
Bisia. That is, thank you very much.
Okay.
Voila.
Yeah, in Mende.
All right.
Nice. Bisia Kaka.
Bisia.
I didn't know that there was a Mende brother in. How you doing?
I'm fine.
All right. Welcome to the chat.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Is it your first time?
Of course.
So you can teach you about the Mendes next time. I don't know.
Welcome, my Mende brother. Welcome, my Mende brother. I have on my maternal side, my African ancestry thing matches. One of the ethnic groups I matches is the Mende. And my Mende name is what's my Mende name? But I have a Mende name as well. My Mende name is I'll give it to y'all in the chat.
No problem.
Okay.
Mine is Basilo.
Okay.
Basilo.
You got Mendes in Liberia and Sierra Leone, is it? In both countries?
Yes.
Yeah, Sierra Leone, of course, Sierra Leone.
Yes.
Okay. There's quite a lot of Cameroonian in Sierra Leone, because what happened is that there's some slave ship who went from Cameroon to Sierra Leone. Yeah, so there's a lot of brothers over there as well.
Of course.
Wow. So, Brother Monte.
My Mende name is Shekel. Sorry about that.
Shekel.
My Mende name is Shekel.
Okay.
I'm listening to y'all brothers, but I'm also sipping a little something on the side too. So my mind is like. So when you see my picture go back to the with me with the Igbo Isiago attire, you know, I'm eating or eating or drinking or doing something else.
Okay.
So my Mende name is Shekel, but I hear that from many Mendes that name is an Islamic name, and they said when I come to Sierra Leone, I will get an official Mende name. So we'll see how it goes. That's on my mother's maternal side, but through Ancestry.com,
our DNA still remains the same, connected with those who are on the continent.
Africa, we are one and we are together. Oh, Africa.